Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Fanfiction podcast. Today we will be continuing our journey of what if Deku played for both sides. So, before we continue, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Nezu chuckled. Of course, I do allow myself some bad habits just to see how you humans react, the creature said. But enough about that. What am I? A dog, a rat, or a bear? Midoriya shook his head. None of the above. Looking at your physiology and the color pattern of your fur, you appear to be a stoat, more specifically an Eastern Siberian stoat. Permanently in winter coloration, probably from Kamchatka or Hokkaido, the teenager said, a cheeky grin slowly crossing his face. But more to the point, you're the principal. Nezu went deathly quiet for a moment, then began to chuckle. It started as a small giggle, then became full-blown laughter, and finally a high animalistic tittering. Yagi, who was sitting on a couch off to one side, began to look around nervously. Finally, the principal stopped and grinned at Midoriya. You're the first to have figured it out, he laughed, turning to All Might. Yagi, your apprentice and I are going to get along very well. What have I unleashed upon this poor, unsuspecting world? The symbol of peace. Wondered. That's good, I guess, he said. So tell me, Midoriya, how do you feel after gaining one for all? The principal asked. Sipping his tea. Different, Midoriya replied, looking at his hands and flexing his fingers momentarily. Whenever I call it up, I feel like there's a storm inside me that I'm barely containing, giving me the strength and energy to do things beyond the impossible. Yagi was telling me that you injured yourself earlier, something that hasn't happened to previous users, Nezu said. Do you think there's a way to address this? I think I'm simply not physically capable of handling 100% yet and won't be able to until I finish puberty, Midoriya said, pulling out one of his notebooks and jotting information about himself in it. Given how powerful the stockpile is, it makes far more sense for me to wrap my entire body in a low-power shroud of one for all for most things and to only use high percentage moves as finishers or last resort attacks. Nezu peered down at Midoriya's notes, a curious expression on his face. May I see your notes, Midoriya? Your analysis skills seem to be outstanding for their age. The greenette handed the stoat his notebook and watched the mammal's eyes slowly widen as he read across the entries, his mental quirk enabling him to read the entries much faster than most could. This is, oh my goodness, incredible, Nezu said. You have an incredible natural talent and I do hope that you'll continue to nurture it at UA High if you choose to continue your career here. I would be honored, Midoriya said, rising to his feet and allowing a thin blanket of one for all, at most a casual 2 to 3% wrap around his body. His eyes and hair glowed slightly as a hint of electricity danced through the air. Yes, this will work. I'll call it full cowling. All Might watched in awe. I really found an incredible kid, didn't I, Nana? He thought to himself. Conversing with Nezu as a near equal, figuring out how to safely use one for all. Within less than a day, he's going to do great things, I can tell. Rising to his feet, the symbol of peace addressed his protégé. Young Midoriya, now that your arm is healed, I really should return you to your home, he said. We'll continue your training in 3 days at a local gym that I recently finished refurbishing, but until then, take the rest of this week off. Buffing up into his muscle form, Yagi flashed a smile. You've earned this. I'm home, the green-haired teenager shouted, kicking off his shoes and stepping through the front door. Their house was oddly quiet, the only noise being some indistinct talking on the television. Welcome back, Izuku, Eri said, running out from around a corner and tackling him in a hug. Izuku smiled and hugged his sister back. Thank you, Eri-chan, he said, straightening up. Where's Mom and Dad? Mama is in the living room watching TV, and Papa is on the TV, Eri responded, turning and walking towards the living room. Midoriya followed, wondering what his sister meant by Papa is on the TV. Welcome home, Izuku, his mother said, standing up from the couch to hug him. I'm just checking the news, and your father, well, you should see for yourself. Izuku sat down and finally had a chance to check the news reports on the TV, only for his eyes to bulge in shock. A cheery jingle sounded through the air as a graphic flashed across the screen. Election. Night update. The graphic flashed away to reveal a man with one large horn and an unassuming dark-haired woman. Welcome back to JNN's Triennial House of Counselors. Election coverage. I'm Daikaku Miyagi, the man said. And I'm Hitami Hinamori. JNN has verified with local and prefectural election officials, and can now make a solid projection about tonight's results. We are now projecting that, in what was an upset until just a few weeks ago, the newly formed party called A Future Outright has won 47 seats in the House of Councillors, boosting it to become the second largest behind the ruling Constitutional Liberal Party. Businessman and AFO party leader Hisashi Akitani has announced the formation of a minority coalition opposing the Constitutional Liberal, Hearts and Minds, and Nippon Restoration Party's majority coalition. The screen changed to a picture of Hisashi standing atop a campaign bus, wearing his usual outfit aside from a pair of reading glasses and a black clip-on necktie. Tonight, my fellow Japanese, we celebrate our successes, he shouted, to cheers from the crowd below. Our work is hardly done, as we continue to advocate for heroics reform, careful economic deregulation and clean energy. Looking to one side, the former demon lord continued his speech. Alongside the other minority parties, we have formed a narrow opposition coalition and now have to select a vice president for the House of Councillors, he said. With that in mind, I would like you all to welcome your new councillor vice president, Shizuoka Prefecture's own Tomura. Shigaraki. Midoriya watched the TV in stunned surprise, his adoptive brother walking onto the stage to give a speech and taking his new role as one of the most powerful elected leaders in Japan in stride. As Tenko droned on about something involving reform and unity, the green-haired teen turned and realized that a sheepish-looking Himiko was seated on the nearby rocking chair. She gave him a wave and a nervous chuckle. Surprise. Chapter end notes. Author's notes. I know I released Chapter 9 only a few days ago, but as Himiko said, surprise? To sum things up for this celebratory Halloween update, Midoriya got to talk to his predecessors and established a link between his original Quirk and OFA, meaning he'll be able to trade quirks between them to satiate AFO's quirk hunger while also interacting with vestiges outside of those in OFA. Second and third do not approve of Hisashi's son being the ninth holder, but they'll warm up, eventually, maybe. Nezu is impressed by Yagi's choice in successor, which bodes poorly for the government and other villains across Japan. And now you know why politician Midoriya Hisashi and politician Shigaraki Tomura were in the tags on AO3. The fact that I'm publishing this right before midterm elections here in the US feels incredibly ironic. Fun fact, the last part required a half-hour-long dive into Japanese politics and their electoral structure. I was originally gonna have Tenko be appointed Minister of Defense, but that required him to be a member of the House of Representatives, and since they're elected every 4 years as opposed to the House of Councillors 3 and I have a politics plotline planned for just past when the summer camp arc took place in canon, I had to change it. We're just going to assume electoral reforms were passed that allowed an 18-year-old to run for the House of Councillors, since in IRL Japan you have to be 30. The chapter title is indeed a reference to the fantastic work Conversations with A. Cryptid by A Mournful Howl in the Night. Go check it out. The entrance exam will be in the next chapter, followed by the first day at UA and then the battle trial, so look forward to it. As ever, follow favorite bookmark leave. Kudos tell a friend. DVD 181. Next update, November 6th. Chapter notes. Top contender. Happy Friday, everyone. Have an early update. See the end of the chapter for more notes. To the surprise of absolutely nobody in the Midoriya family or the League, Izuku was caught off guard by the revelation that his father and cousin had gone into politics while he wasn't looking. Himiko's awkward reaction to the Izuku's enlightenment turned out to be due to her role in their campaign, acting as Tenko's campaign manager and now as treasurer for the AFO party. However, the Greenette was taking the new level of influence they'd gained through his father and cousin's little side project in stride, though their new status as public figures meant Twice would be very busy during future operations. Yagi's new gym gave Midoriya the perfect opportunity to keep improving his physical strength in preparation for the entrance exam, lifting more and more weight and increasing his running distance as fall slowly became winter, the holidays flew by, and eventually the days began to lengthen again as the exam day, February 26th, drew closer. As for Aldera, well, after his little lecture on the day of the sludge villain incident, as the media was now calling it, much of the school, faculty and student body alike was far too scared of him to even talk to him. Even Bakugou had backed off after that day's events, probably more out of confusion than anything resembling gratitude. This didn't make things any less confusing when several of his classmates not named Bakugou cornered him after class 2 days before UA High's entrance exam. "And how can I help you for?" the villain leader asked, looking up at his classmates Ari Umaru, Shinichiro Kintsugi, Anko Suika, and Osamu Mokuno. His eyebrow raised slightly as he took this small group in. "Kintsugi, where's your shirt?" The muscular teen's eyes widened in surprise as he realized he'd forgotten to put his Gakuren jacket on yet again. "Oh no, not again," he shouted, turning to fumble in his school bag for the missing garment. The other three stood around awkwardly until Kintsugi returned, now wearing the jacket he was supposed to. Midoriya blinked a few times, looking around at them. "So, hello," he wondered aloud, only to be caught off guard as all four dropped to the floor in a bow. "Please forgive us." "What?" the Greenette asked in surprise, caught off guard as an apology out of the blue was probably the last thing he expected from any of his classmates. "4 years, we've stood by and watched as Bakugou and his lackeys insulted, beat and humiliated you, and we didn't stop for a second to realize that we were wrong to do so," said Mokuno. "We all came here to humbly apologize for everything that's happened to you." "Here." Kintsugi nodded along in agreement. "During our freshman year here, you saved me from Bakugou once and I never even thought to thank you because I'd fallen into the same viewpoint everyone else had of you," Suika added. "All that kindness, and what did I do to repay you? I laughed at you, like everyone else in the school." The water user was on the verge of tears. "We're all guilty of bystander syndrome," Umaru said, slowly standing up from her Dejiza. "I don't think any of us deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you can at least move on from here without worrying that we hated you." Midoriya sighed. "And what could you have done otherwise? Become victims of Bakugou's inflated ego and explosive temper as well?" he asked. "Because if that was the alternative, I can see why you'd choose to stay on his good side instead, even if you did so unconsciously. Bystander syndrome usually isn't something you choose, it's something that happens through either mob mentality or peer pressure," the Greenette continued. "Knowing how screwed up human psychology is, it wouldn't be right for me to stick the blame for his misdeeds on you. Besides, the worst any of you ever did was laugh at me or ignore me. Compared to Bakugou's history with me, that's not going to keep me awake at night." "But Suika began to object, only for Midoriya to cut her off. "Look, if you want to make it up to me and feel like I've really forgiven you, there's one thing I'd like you to do. When you start high school, no matter where you go, then be the person that takes the plunge and breaks through bystander syndrome. Befriend the one kid alone at their lunch table. I can promise you it'll make all the difference in the world to them." With that, the teenager turned around. "I have to go now to get ready for UA's entrance exam, but if you can do that, then maybe you'll feel like I've forgiven you. Then all you'll have to do is figure out how to forgive yourselves." As he began to walk away, the other four called after him in support. "Knock 'em dead, Midoriya. Don't give Bakugou any satisfaction. You'd better get in. We're all rooting for you. Good luck, Midoriya-kun." As he left Aldera Middle School that day, a small smile graced the Greenette's features. Maybe he had a few good memories from that hellhole after all, and maybe there was still hope for his classmates to become good people, maybe even for Bakugou. February 26th, 7:30 a.m., Musutafu. Finally, the long-awaited day arrived on a crisp February morning, when Izuku Midoriya finally arrived at Ultra Academia High School to embrace his destiny. "Ue hi, he muttered, chuckling slightly. "Guess this is really the start line for me, and everything else up until now has been just practice. Get out of my way, you useless nerd." An all too familiar voice came from behind him. Midoriya sighed and turned around in time to see Bakugou storming up the steps to Yue's front gate. "Well, good morning to you too, Bakugou," he said, plastering the most blatantly fake smile possible on his face. "Ready to take second place?" The blonde's face contorted in an expression of absolute fury. "You fucker," he shouted. "I can't wait to kill you here." Midoriya laughed in a completely deadpan manner. "You have fun with that then. In the meantime, I'm going to be passing the exam." Bakugou quivered in sheer, total, utter fury for a few moments, before letting out an incoherent yell at the top of his lungs and storming off towards the school. The green-haired teen watched him leave, a smug smile on his face, then cracked his knuckles. "Here we go then," he said, before stepping forward, and immediately tripping on a loose paver. Before he could fall into a front roll to regain his balance, Midoriya's fall suddenly stopped. "Not in the "oh phew, I caught myself" way, the "oh crap, I hit the ground" way, or even the "someone grabbed me by the collar" way, but in the "somebody hit the pause button on the movie that is my life" way. "Sorry about using my quirk on you without permission," came a slightly familiar voice from behind him. "I just thought it'd be bad luck to trip on the day of the exam, wouldn't it?" Turning around, Midoriya was met with the sight of a somewhat plain-looking brunette girl with round, blushed cheeks. A sense of familiarity struck him as he looked at the girl for a few moments longer. "Wait a minute, don't I know you?" he asked, noticing the pad-like mutation structures on her fingertips. "I could swear I've met you before." The girl jumped back, a nervous expression on her face. "What? I've definitely never seen your face before," she said just a little too quickly. "Is that so?" Midoriya asked, looking her up and down. "Tell me, what do the words Hisashi, Overhaul, and Prometheus mean to you?" Immediately, the other teenager's eyes widened almost comically, before she grabbed him by the wrist and dragged him away from the front gate. A couple of other prospective students noticed the interaction, causing some of them to laugh. Already getting steamy without knowing each other's names? Two less competitors in the exam today. Meanwhile, Izuku Midoriya found himself pushed against a wall with a knife pointed at his throat, an angry expression on the other teen's face. "Tell me how the hell you know about that incident, or I'll make sure Prometheus has you as a captive within the next 24 hours. Whether alive or dead," she growled. "Well, it would be rather awkward if you sent me to my own hideout. Tenko would never let me hear the end of it." Miss Inversion Midoriya responded. "Sorry to have spooked you like that. I forgot that you hadn't seen my uncovered face at any point during our mission to get rid of Overhaul." Inversion laughed and exhaled in relief. "If we're going to be taking the hero exam together, and hopefully getting in together, we should really stop calling each other by our villain names. I'm Okako Uraraka, how about you?" "Izuku Midoriya," the Greenette responded. "Future hero, quirk analyst, and definitely not the leader of the League of Villains. A pleasure to finally make your acquaintance, Uraraka-san." "The pleasure is all mine," Uraraka said, bowing slightly. "We should save the chit-chat for later though, it's almost exam time." As the two of them ran off towards the lecture hall, neither realized that a third person had heard their conversation. Inversion, the famous levitating thief of Mie, is also taking the hero exam, wondered another prospective student, her enhanced hearing having picked up the conversation between Uraraka and Midoriya. I don't particularly have any qualms with her, and that Prometheus kid saved old man Oguro the headache of taking down the Hisashi, so I'll let them go for now, but if they do anything rash, I'll be the first to teach them a lesson. On that note, Kyoka Jiro, musician, middle schooler, and also the vigilante vibe, renowned for her brutality towards her opponents, continued towards the lecture hall. Little did she realize that someone else with enhanced hearing had also heard the conversation. So two of the individuals responsible for taking down that Yakuza psychopath are aiming for the hero course as well, thought Mizo Shoji, also known by his codename Hydra, as a member of the Meta Liberation Army. Perhaps I should notify our leadership. Just 2 hours later, Midoriya had finished the written exam and, since he'd been deemed to have had a passing grade, he was called back to the auditorium. To his dismay, however, he'd been parked next to Bakugou again, since they were both applying from Aldera. I see you somehow fucking passed, you stupid nerd, the blonde growled. Midoriya rolled his eyes. Of course I passed. Who do you take me for, you? Before Bakugou could attempt homicide on UA's campus, the lights dimmed in the room and a spotlight illuminated the podium at the front of the auditorium, revealing a blonde-haired man in a leather jacket. Hey, listeners, it's me, the one and only present MIC, here to start off your exam, the voice hero. I didn't know he was part of UA's faculty, Midoriya murmured to himself. Shut up, Bakugou growled. As you probably know, you're all here because you passed the written exam and qualified to take the practical for the hero course. Present MIC continued. If you fail this part, don't worry. Passing the written exam gives you a direct path into any of the other career tracks here at UA. Let's take a look at the exam. The screen behind MIC changed slides from a generic welcome logo to a short animated GIF of MIC himself running around a city, defeating some military green-colored robots of various designs. You'll all be experiencing combat against robot enemies with values of 1, 2, and 3 points each, depending on their model, of course, in one of our 10 urban battlegrounds, the voice hero elaborated. Once you get to the battleground on your temporary ID, defeat as many enemies as you can to earn as many points as possible. That's how you'll get in. Excuse me, a voice echoed from the top of the auditorium, another spotlight training itself on a bespectacled teenager with dark blue hair. This handout shows 4 types of foe. Villain, yet you only mentioned 3. If this is a mistake on official UA material, it is utterly shameful. And you there, he shouted, pointing at Midoriya as another spotlight lit up where he was seated. To his credit, the greenette simply raised an eyebrow and pointed at himself in mock confusion. Yes, you with the green hair. Your muttering at the start of this seminar was rude and distracting. You should leave if you're not going to take this seriously. If I may continue to be so rude, Midoriya replied, channeling a little of one for all into his vocal cords to make his voice louder. Then I'd like to ask you to explain why you interrupted present MIC and assumed the worst about the pamphlets when he was about to get to it. The sheepish expression on the other teen's face as he sat down was totally worth it to Midoriya. With that out of the way, I'll explain the last robot. It's an arena trap designed to go berserk in tight spaces and is worth 0 points, so I'd stay away from it if I were you. MIC finished his speech. A wise man once said that a true hero overcomes adversity to bring a better day, so as our motto says, go beyond, plus ultra. Bakugou immediately stormed away to the lockers to change into workout clothes for the exam. Midoriya followed at a somewhat more leisurely pace, unaware of several sets of eyes on him among the crowd and throughout UA. A pair of tired triangular onyx ones, some on the ends of odd tentacles, round brown ones, grey orbs behind thick square glasses, green eyes behind tinted amber lenses, and a pair of beady black ones watching from behind a security system. Oh dear. All of 10 minutes later, the greenette teenager stood in a slightly baggy teal tracksuit outside of training ground beta, doing a quick set of stretches while talking to the voices in his head. So remember, ninth, all you have to do is feel my awesome power, and then Blackwhip will do the rest. Thanks but no thanks, Banjo-san. That'd be an awfully weird thing to try to explain to Yagi. Sensei. Shinomori-san, could you? I'll give you a heads up whenever you're in danger, ninth. Don't you worry. Good luck, Izuku. Make our family proud. What seventh said, knock it out of the park, nephew. Right. Midoriya thought, reopening his eyes and spotting Uraraka nearby. Hey, Uraraka, he called, waving at her, only to be surprised as a hand landed on his shoulder. Turning around, the greenette resisted the urge to roll his eyes as he came face to face with the teenager who had scolded him in the auditorium earlier. And how can I help? You. Were you hired by UA to disturb other applicants? The other teen asked. Can't you see? That girl is trying to concentrate dash. Midoriya. Uraraka said as she walked up behind him. Perfect timing. My nerves were starting to get to me and a familiar face is just what I needed. Seeing this, the blue-haired provocateur backed off slightly, surprised that they knew each other. Good to see you again too, Uraraka. Midoriya responded. Are you ready dash? Go. Present MIC shouted from a tower that overlooked all 11 sites, each with 100 applicants assigned to them. There's no countdown in real life. Good luck. Midoriya shouted, clapping his former contract employee on the shoulder. Before turning and running towards the entrance, his legs already pumping with a solid 5% of one for all and carrying him far ahead of the competition. The rest of the applicants started running merely a moment later, which brought them into the training ground just in time to watch as the greenette sheared the head off of a two-pointer with an uppercut and then leap off of its headless corpse to soccer kick its cranium into a pair of one-pointers further down the street. The projectile ricocheted between them for a moment, thoroughly destroying the bots as their attacker scaled a nearby building for a better vantage point. 4. Odd, I seem to remember him being quirkless when we were taking on the Hisashi. Uraraka thought, touching a trio of three-pointers and allowing them to float above the rooftops of the fake apartment buildings before dropping them to the street, gravity doing the rest for her. Maybe it was a recent development. This feels incredible. Midoriya laughed, skipping across the rooftops. Any tips? Shinomori-san? There's a boy over there about to get ambushed, the long-dead fourth holder replied. Danger sense pinging slightly to direct Midoriya towards a blonde teenager clutching his stomach. A pair of two-pointers were rapidly approaching the boy until Midoriya kicked one, shrouded in green lightning from one for all. Then, in a single deft movement, the greenette grabbed the scorpion-like stinger off of the broken one and launched it through the eye socket of the active one. Are you okay? He asked, kneeling down next to the other teenager. Also, I guess that's 8 now. Mon Dayu, the blonde muttered. I just need a minute for my stomach to settle. We don't have a minute to spare, Midoriya replied. I'll carry you until you feel better. Grab on. Wait, what dash? Was all the other teen could manage before Midoriya hoisted him onto his back. At this point, Yuga Aomar had no idea what to do other than hang on for dear life as green electricity crackled around them, his savior taking a moment to rip a stop sign from the ground and shove it through another robot's severed head as a makeshift hammer before demolishing a three-pointer with it. 11. As you can see, there are a variety of different strategies and combat styles that can be employed in this exam, said Nezu, the principal of UA High, as he and the other faculty sat in a viewing room to judge the examinees. Behind them sat the 4 recommendation. Students admitted Momo Yoroirozu, Shoto Todoroki, Setsuna Tokuge, and Juzo Honinuki. Each student was seated with their sponsor to the exam, Yoroirozu Group CEO Ringo. Yoroirozu, the Flame Hero, Endeavor, the Magic Hero, Majestic, and the Shield Hero. Crust, respectively. Gathering intelligence to locate your opponents. Mizo Shoji stood atop a roof in training. Ground Beater, using his enhanced senses to find robots to ambush and destroy. Quickly traversing a wide area. Tenya Ida dropkicked another 2-pointer, the engines. In his calves working overtime as he sped off in pursuit of new prey. Raw combat power. Katsuki Bakugou leapt onto a 3-pointer from above, shredding its armor with a series of precise attacks while surrounded by the corpses of other destroyed bots. Staying calm under pressure. Kyoka Gyro calmly slid under a 1-pointer's outstretched limb, shorting its circuits out with a quick burst of sound by plugging one of her headphone jack-shaped earlobes into its armor. Outwitting superior opponents to gain an upper hand. Minoru Mineta dropped into an alleyway from above as he yanked a number of purple orbs off his head, their adhesive properties sticking a group of 2-pointers together. And the willingness to lend a helping hand, even with no apparent benefit. Izuku Midoriya tossed Yuga Ayama into the air, where the French teenager unleashed his quirk again to blast apart another robot while Midoriya dispatched 2 more. The best heroes combine all these traits, even in the face of our final test, Nezu continued. Gesturing to the deflated All Might. Yaga-san, would you do the honors? I would be delighted, the incognito symbol of peace responded, opening the plastic cover. Over a red button labeled Kiju switch and pressing it. In each of the 11 training grounds, a false building exploded in the middle of the arena. Revealing a colossal robot. Military green and shaped a little like an insectoid centaur, the executor bots towered over their surroundings and elicited immediate reactions of shock and fear from the examinees. That's the 0-pointer. Midoriya shouted as he looked up at the metal colossus, Ayama, gasping for breath on the ground behind him. I knew UA donors had some deep pockets. But this is ridiculous. Ground Beater's 0-pointer raised its fist and punched downward, a massive shockwave, sweeping examinees off their feet. Ayama-san, please evacuate to a safe distance, the Greenette said, removing his track jacket to give his arms greater mobility, his upper half now clad in just a short-sleeved black base layer. This robot poses a risk to every examinee here. I'm going to take it down. The French blonde nodded in affirmation, blasting a robot away from another examinee as he ran. I currently have around 56 points from combat, helping Ayama-san slowed me down, Midoriya said, doing some quick stretches. That's probably enough to get in safely. At that point, the villain leader noticed another figure running in his direction among the crowd of fleeing examinees. Uraraka. The brunette brightened and changed course to stop in front of him. Yes, Midoriya, she asked, panting slightly. I need you to nullify my gravity for a moment and release me when I'm on a collision course with that thing, he said, pointing to the 0-pointer. I'm going to take it down. Are you sure? The brunette asked. I know you're capable, but the collateral damage from that is on a whole other level from Overhaul. Positive Midoriya responded, one for all flaring around him again. First though, we'll have to get in closer. You think you're up for the challenge? For just a moment, the thief's resolve wavered in the face of this challenge, before coming back fourfold. I was born ready, she shouted. Let's do this, Midoriya. The 2 teenagers rushed back towards the arena trap, getting in closer and closer to the robot of deadly proportions. Chunks of concrete began to fall around them from the 0-pointer's frenzied attacks, but danger sense warned Midoriya any time that either he or Uraraka were at risk, allowing him to dodge or deflect incoming projectiles. Now, the brunette thief touched her right hand to his shoulder. Go, Midoriya, she shouted, leaping backward as the greenette blurred out of existence with his jump. Now I just have to stick the exact timing to release him. In all truth, there's really no practical point to this move on my part, Midoriya thought as he soared into the sky, his trajectory taking him directly between the zero-pointer's fingers. I don't earn any points for it, everyone seems to have evacuated a safe distance, and the exam will end in just a minute or so anyway. But where's the fun in all that? The greenette asked himself mentally as a grin crossed his face. This moment isn't for the other examinees or the judges or even my friends. This one's for me. Release. Uraraka shouted, touching her fingertips together and returning Midoriya's weight and inertia to him. One for all. Shock absorption. Adrenaline. Overhaul. Midoriya called up his quirks, channeling the stockpile's full strength into his arm, shock absorption amping his durability. With Overhaul on standby to fix his injuries and adrenaline to buff the effects of his other quirks. Heroes and villains the world over, bear witness to me. New York, smash. The effects were nearly instantaneous. As soon as Midoriya's jumping uppercut smacked into the zero-pointer's chin, backed by over a century of stockpiled physical strength, the robot was lifted clear off the ground and carried high into the air, soaring out of training ground Beta, over training ground Alpha and into the forest of training ground Omega, which was thankfully not in use at the moment. And in an instant, all across UA's campus, jaws dropped in awe at the display of pure strength. Is that strong? Uraraka thought in awe, having just watched a building-sized robot take flight directly in front of her. What the fuck was that? Bakugou wondered, having just seen the zero-pointer fly clear over training ground Alpha and narrowly avoid hitting that exam site's own arena trap. So manly, a hero Kirishima muttered, watching thousands of tons of metal soar over the street he'd just cleared of robots. Mon Dayu, he will need to hear of this applicant, Amar thought, unaware of the connection between his dearest uncle and Izuku Midoriya. That strength, it rivals all mights, was the sole thought that flashed through the minds of Endeavor and his son, eliciting two different reactions, jealousy from Enji, and cold hatred from Shoto. Oh my goodness. Momo Urarozu thought in surprise, a hint of worry and self-doubt creeping into her head and telling her she couldn't compete with someone of that caliber. Magnificently done, the principal thought, outright cheering and jumping up and down on his seat. I knew I chose right. Young Midoriya, you'll make us all proud. Toshinori Yagi stood just as present MIC called the end of the exam, watching Midoriya make almost perfect landing preparations just in time for Uraraka to catch him with her quirk. There's no way. They don't both get in. 1 week later, March 7th. It's here, Izuku Nishin, Eri shouted, waving a letter in her hand that Inko had given her. After going to check the mailbox, the greenette was so surprised that he fell off his desk chair, having been writing a quirk analysis in one of his new notebooks. Coming, he replied, scrambling to his feet and running into the common room. Sitting down at the family's dining table, the teenager opened the envelope marked with the UA high seal and reached in, grabbing a metal object of some sort. To his surprise, the results weren't on paper, but rather in a hologram projector that activated as soon as he dropped it on the table. I am here, as a projection, All Might shouted, projected into the Midoriya family's house wearing a garish yellow monstrosity of a suit. On the couch nearby, Hisashi wrinkled his nose in disapproval. Sorry about the recent radio silence, I was getting ready to do my duties as the newest member of UA's faculty. What? Izuku and Hisashi asked in unison as Inko poked her head around the corner from the kitchen. Let's get on with your results before the production team shouts at me again for taking too long. You placed second on the written exam with a score of 96.2%, only a couple of missed questions, and ectoplasm called the essay portion flawless, Yagi said. And as for the practical, you knocked it out of the park. 55 points were earned for destroying robots, which was enough to get you into the top 10, but that's not all. An image was displayed on the screen behind All Might, showing the scoreboard for the top 10 examinees. UA also awards rescue points for doing the right thing to save other examinees from harm's way. You earned 25 rescue points for aiding Yuga Aoyama, and hit the maximum of 60 rescue points for saving the other examinees from the arena trap. That grand total of 115 points is the highest seen in 20 years, and puts you solidly in first place. Sure enough, the scoreboard behind All Might showed a breakdown of the points for the top 10 examinees, and Izuku's name was easily in first. Looking down the list, the Greenette smirked as he noticed Bakugou in only third place, with Uraraka also ahead of the Eternal Pain. In his rear, 1. Izuku Midoriya, 55 combat, 60 rescue. 2. Okako Uraraka, 40 combat, 45 rescue. 3. Katsuki Bakugou, 77 combat, 0 rescue. 4. Ahiro Kirishima, 39 combat, 35 rescue. 5. Ibara Shiozaki, 40 combat, 28 rescue. 6. Itsuka Kendo, 25 combat, 40 rescue. 7. Tenya Ida, 52 combat, 9 rescue. 8. Yosetsu Awase, 54 combat, 6 rescue. 9. Tetsu, 49 combat, 10 rescue. 10. Fumikage Tokoyami, 47 combat, 10 rescue. Allow me to make it official, young Midoriya, welcome to your hero academia, Yagi shouted as the projector shut off. Izuku barely had time to breathe before Eri tackled him in a hug, with both of his parents quickly wrapping him in their embrace as well. You're going to make us proud, son, Hisashi said, ruffling his son's hair. Make sure you will never be the same again. I'm so proud of you, Izuku. Inko sobbed in joy. Yay, Izuku Nishin, Eri cheered, happy for her favorite big brother. UA isn't ready for me, Izuku responded. I'll leave them wondering what happened on my way to the top. The Greenette then smirked as he enhanced his hearing with One for All, focusing his improved senses on a certain household in another part of Musutafu. What the fuck do you mean I got third place? How did Deku beat me? Yep, wondering what happened indeed, he thought, his smirk growing slightly wider. Chapter end notes. Author's notes. Oops. I did it again. The entrance exam is all wrapped up and it's time for the first day at UA to happen. In this chapter, some of Midoriya's classmates at Aldera apologized for their bystander syndrome. Uraraka was revealed to be Inversion, a peerless legacy member hired to help with the Overhaul raid. Additionally, we also learned that Kyoka Gyro is Vibe, a member of Vigilantes Anonymous, and Mizo Shoji is Hydra, one of Skeptic's subordinates in the Meta Liberation Army. Being able to use One for All competently makes a world of difference in the entrance exam arc. Additionally, Midoriya and his father's spy have now made contact, though neither yet realizes the other's identity. I am incredibly proud of the little mental monologue I had Midoriya do when he defeated the Zero-Pointer. I feel like it's a little window into who this version of this character is and how he's different from canon. Oh no, Bakugou only got third place? Sad. Next chapter, we have the first day at UA. As ever, follow favorite if you're on FFN. Leave kudos on AO3, and share this around. Thank you. DVD 181. Next update, November 12th. Chapter notes. Back to school. See the end of the chapter 4. Notes. The night after the entrance exam, Ultra Academia High School stands atop a formerly volcanic plateau in Shizuoka Prefecture. The picturesque visage of Mount Fuji towering over it in the background while the school itself looks out over the city of Musutafu, covering over 500 hectares with state-of-the-art facilities for training generations of public servants. The campus is centered on the 40,000 square meter main building, which is visible from downtown Musutafu. Having produced heroes the caliber of All Might, Endeavor and Best Jeanist, it's little surprise that the school Has a number of very wealthy private donors keeping it afloat and independent from the federal government and Hero Public Safety Commission. What most people don't know is that a cryptid lives at the top of UA's main building. So these are the creme de la creme of high school applicants in Japan this year? Humans are such curious creatures indeed, Nezu said, slowly sipping a cup of tea. I wonder what little secrets we can find about each of them. With his Quirk high-spec, a mutation that massively increased the Stoat's intellect from animalistic to genius levels, the fur-covered principal pored over every information source available, ranging from camera footage and birth certificates to police records and hidden databases. By the time he was done, his brow was slightly sweaty and he had a list of students with potential illegal connections. Let's see what we have here, Nezu said, concentrating on the notes he had for each of his suspects. Yuga Amr, his interactions with Izuku Midoriya, below, are somewhat suspicious, as is the lack of information about his past in France. More intelligence must be gathered. Yosetsu Awase, security camera footage I obtained and then deleted from the hosting server, seems to show him welding together two ends of a lamp pole around an unconscious A-rank villain that had been seen earlier fighting the known vigilante Porcupine, aka Soga Kujisaki. He is most likely the vigilante's anonymous member Adhesion. Toru Hagakure. The fact that the Tokyo Metro PD has yet to match her to descriptions of Ghost, a well-known Peerless Legacy member active in that city, is an absolute embarrassment to their capabilities as detectives. Kyoka Gyro, fighting style and abilities bear a strong resemblance to another vigilante's anonymous member, Vibe. This vigilante has yet to kill a villain but has severely injured several of C and B rank, with the head, chest and groins of these villains all being targeted. Kinoko Komori was seen alongside Ibara Shiozaki, below, in shaky drone footage taken at a known base of the Ecological Restoration Alliance, greeting the latter alongside ERA leaders Gaia and Sitka. Seems to be just a foot soldier. Shihai Kuroiro, ability to travel via shadows, matches descriptions of Equalizer member Void, as does his fighting style. Raymond Tadeno thinks his slick hiding his terrorist organization behind Base Corporation's economic prowess, but he isn't anyone with a brain. Knows about his past association with Hideyuki Kazu. Izuku Midoriya, some form of connection to Okako Uraraka and Yuga Amr, though the specifics of these relationships are unknown. The lack of information on him is intriguing, though, especially given his status as the holder of One for All. Nito Monoma, a power-copying quirk and a flamboyant sense of style that extends even to his gym clothes. This teenager is definitely Kid Lupin, the Peerless Legacy member who has been burgling Yakuza-owned entertainment businesses in Isazakicho, Yokohama. His dramatic enough that he probably drinks grape juice out of wine glasses. How did they not catch him already? Mashirao Ojiro, if the rumors behind the Meta Liberation Army still existing down in Deka City are true, then Ojiro's scholarship being bankrolled by Detnerat Corporation likely means he is a member of that organization. Hiryu Rin, heir to the Kirin Lake Triad, a Chinese mafia group with some business dealings in Japan. Unlikely to pose any sort of threat at UA High. Rikido Soto, like Shihai Kuroiro, above, footage taken in Karelia City makes it likely that Soto is also a member of the Equalizers. His description seems to specifically match a recently promoted member under the codename Addiction, which may reference his quirk. Ibara Shiozaki, seen in footage taken at an Ecological Restoration Alliance base, accompanying ERA co-leaders Sitka and Gaia as part of their official entourage. With any luck, she didn't pick up a case of nihilistic insanity and terminal stupidity from them. Mizo Shoji, like Mashirao Ojiro, above, Shoji's tuition at UA is to be paid in full by Detnerat, meaning he is also likely a Meta Liberation Army member. Given that his medical records show a history of anti-mutant discrimination against him, I am unsurprised that he joined that group. Kosi Tsubaraba, His quirk and physical description seemed to line up with a recently debuted vigilante from northern Shikoku dubbed Glass. May or may not be a vigilante's anonymous member. Okako Uraraka, all but confirmable as inversion, the levitating thief of Mie and a peerless legacy member seen in the company of Mr. Compress himself. Pulled a knife on Izuku Midoriya, above, shortly before the exam, deepening my curiosity about both. 15 out of 40 Nezu said, his computer screen displaying the various pieces of information he'd gathered on each one. Over a quarter of this year's incoming hero class are either villains or vigilantes, are connected to villains or vigilantes, or are under suspicion of potentially fitting into one of the other two categories. The stoat slowly began to chuckle, the sound quickly turning into a belly laugh and then into a maniacal cackle as he reached a conclusion as to what to do. This is going to be so interesting. I'm not telling anyone. Another file sitting off to one side of the pile caught Nezu's eye. HM, he wondered aloud, opening it to find the 37th placing applicant, Hitoshi Shinsu, eyeing the 36th placing applicant, Minoru Mineta, whose score was around 4 points higher than Shinsu's. The principal's face took on an expression of dangerous manic curiosity. Nobody will notice if I switch the numbers, he chuckled. Good morning, Midoriya. Uraraka greeted the greenette as he caught up with her on the stairwell up to UA. Ready for our first day of classes as hero students. Are you kidding? Midoriya laughed. I was born ready. What class are you in? I'm in class 1A. You? The brunette asked, skipping up the last few stairs towards the UA gate. I'm also in 1A. Midoriya said, following his classmate through the gate and into UA's main building. I'll be curious to see what our fellow students are going to be like. Really? Hoping I don't have to deal with Dash. Get your feet off that desk at once. Make me, dickweed. I shouldn't have said anything, Midoriya sighed, seeing the strict teenager from the entrance exam and his childhood pain in their ass arguing with each other. Uraraka shot him a sympathetic expression before taking the seat she'd been assigned, which, to Midoriya's dismay, was on the opposite side of the classroom from his. Even worse, his assigned seat was directly behind Bakugou, who glared as he passed by but said nothing. Oh, pardon me, the bespectacled teenager said, turning to Midoriya. My name is Tenya Ida, formerly of Sumi Private Academy — an elite, huh? I'll crush you. Bakugou shouted. Ida's eye twitched, but he otherwise ignored Bakugou, causing the blonde to start fuming. As I was saying, I truly owe you an apology, Ida shouted, bowing to Midoriya. You were able to see the true meaning of the exam through the faculty's logical deceptions when I could not. You truly were the superior candidate. Ah, thank you, Ida-san. Izuku Midoriya, nice to meet you, the greenette said. Actually, I had no idea there was any grading based on rescuing others and blew up the 0-pointer to flex my true capabilities in front of the teachers, but you don't need to know that. If you all think you have time to chit-chat, you should leave, a voice echoed from the door. Looking in that direction, Midoriya noticed a yellow thing resembling a caterpillar, which unfurled to reveal a disheveled man with long dark hair wearing a black jumpsuit. A white scarf wrapped around the man's neck, from which he produced a pouch of mango juice that was drained dry with a single gulp. 7 seconds to quiet down. Not the worst I've seen, but in need of improvement, the man said. I am Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher. We're doing a physical assessment on the athletic grounds behind the school in 15 minutes. Anybody not changed into their athletic uniforms there by then will be expelled. Good luck. With that, he exited the room as quickly as he'd entered, leaving a confused student body behind him. Midoriya's eyes narrowed as he recalled the name and appearance of the man teaching him. Eraserhead. That's unfortunate. He's a dangerously observant and effective pro, the greenette thought, writing down his mental notes as he walked to the lockers. To make matters worse, he was a Borosan's classmate before the Garvey incident, which Dad engineered back when he was in his almost comically evil Machiavellian phase. Sometimes I think the brain damage he sustained when Yaga-sensei caved his skull in was a net positive to his life. As the teenagers filed out of class, the greenette felt a tug on his shirt. Turning around, he came face to face with the same blonde boy he remembered saving at the entrance exam. Yama-san, right? Midoriya asked. At the other's nod, he relaxed slightly. You don't have to hide your employment status around me. I already heard it all from your cher uncle. Yama seemed to slump with relief. Merci, Midoriya-san, the Frenchman said. If you know of my affiliation, that is UN charge less I must worry about. How is my benefactor, by the way? My father is fine, Midoriya said, blinking when Yama gulped. He didn't tell you? Non, I was simply told to watch you and keep you out of harm's way, the blonde said. I was unaware you were his heir. Heir? I suppose I am, then the greenette said, chuckling slightly. Hey, if your cher uncle, that makes you my cousin, Yuga-kun. See cousin? Yama sputtered, but by then Midoriya had walked ahead, turning and entering the locker room himself. Once again, however, he wasn't aware of the ears tuned in on him. Yama is affiliated as well? Shoji wondered, his sensitive hearing having detected the conversation as he changed into a special UA track jacket designed around his 6 arms, one hand holding onto his mask to ensure it remained in place to cover his scars. Most interesting. 1 minute to spare. You were all almost expelled, Aizawa said, checking his stopwatch as the class arrived on the field. Today you'll be participating in a standard set of 8 exercises: a 50-meter dash, a grip strength test, a standing long jump, side-to-side steps, a softball throw, a 1-kilometer run, sit-ups and seated toe touches. Only one difference from what you're used to: you can use your quirks for these. But sir, what about orientation? Asked a taller, dark-haired girl. Is that not important to our academics at UA? Going through orientation will be a waste of time for anyone who gets expelled today, Aizawa said, a terrifying expression crossing his face. By the way, whoever scores lowest on this exam is getting expelled for having no potential. The entire class went silent in an instant. And here we go, Midoriya thought, right as a new clamor began. You'd send us home on the first day? That's hardly fair. Are you serious? Fair? Aizawa hissed. Are natural disasters fair? Industrial accidents that set cities ablaze? Rampaging villains with no mind for collateral damage? If fairness is what you seek, heroism isn't for you. Now I suggest getting started before I expel you all for arguing. But first, a demonstration. Bakugou. The blonde teen asked, stepping forward. You garnered the most combat points in the entrance exam. What was your farthest softball throw in middle school? 67 meters. Why? Bakugou said, bringing his hand up just in time to catch the softball. Chucked at him. Step inside the circle and throw it as hard as you can with your quirk, Aizawa said. Anything goes as long as you don't step outside of it. Awesome, the blonde grinned, his right hand beginning to smoke as he took a pitching stance. And drew his arm back. I'll just add a little heat to this throw dash. It's about to get loud, Midoriya sighed, glancing at Yama and Uraraka. I recommend covering your ears. As the three of them did so, he also noticed the violet-haired girl and the 6-armed boy from their class cover their ears. Interesting. Enhanced hearing? Die. Bakugou roared, letting loose with an explosive pitch that rattled the windows of UA's main school building. The ball soared far into the distance, coming down somewhere in a wooded area to the west. The blonde returned to the group of students, passing directly by Midoriya on his way. Beat that, you quirkless cheater, Bakugou hissed. Midoriya smirked in response. Just watch me, Bakugou-chan, he whispered back, eliciting a growl from his childhood foe. 705.2 meters. Aizawa read off his tablet. Those are the kind of results you need to produce to have a chance of staying here at UA. Now start lining up for the first test. You'll be paired. Off for the 50-meter dash. Test 1, 50-meter dash. Yuga AMR, Mina Ashido, please take positions at the starting line. A service robot said from the end of the track, where it was lined up with a camera and a timer to mark down results. It seems that of our group of choice musketeers, I am the first to participate. AMR said, starting towards the line. Do cheer for me, please. Meeting him, there was a girl with bright pink skin and hair, bony horns protruding from the top of her head as a secondary mutation. Ready, Frenchie? She asked, producing an indignant cough from AMR. Runners on your mark, start. While Ashido dashed forward in a fairly normal run, AMR turned his back and jumped in the air. A blast of sparkling energy from his ornate belt shot him backwards down the track, quickly propelling him past Ashido and nearly to the finish line, only for the beam to quit and drop him unceremoniously on the ground. By the time he got back up and fired again, Ashido had reached the end of the track. Mina Ashido, 4.35 second. Yuga AMR, 5.11 second. Mondayu AMR muttered, returning to Midoriya's side. I had forgotten how taxing extended use of my naval laser can be. Stomachaches are truly an inelegant side effect, no? Sounds like something is amiss with his quirk factor. Midoriya thought to himself. Either Dad did it on purpose, or it's simply not possible to adapt the quirk to AMR's physiology. Midoriya sighed as Bakugou easily blew past the girl with the frog mutation, getting a time of 4.13 seconds relative to her 5.58 seconds. Of course he excels again. Good luck, Hagakure. Uraraka called, grabbing Midoriya's attention again. Thanks, Uraraka, came the response from a floating gym uniform, which started towards the track where Ida was waiting. Midoriya raised an eyebrow at the brunette, who giggled slightly. We're friends from our extracurricular activities, she said. I'll introduce you to her and our club's other member in 1B after we get done for the day. Extracurriculars, her? Midoriya said, a wry smile on his face as he brought up Uraraka's other career. Is that what you call it? I mean, why not? It's technically true, the brunette said. Midoriya shrugged and acquiesced, Uraraka's code word for the Peerless Legacy's activities still amusing him. Izuku Midoriya, Mashirao Ojiro, please take positions at the starting line. My turn, the brunette said, walking up to the starting line and taking a position next to the blonde teen with a large, muscular tail. Reaching into his stash of quirks, Midoriya smirked, as he found just what he was looking for. I'll be subtle and make it look like I competed quirkless for this. Reaction time, 1 for all, 1% charge. Runners on your mark, start. The villain leader took off immediately, reaction time letting him start the moment the robot signaled to do so and allowing him to quickly outstrip Ojiro with a subtle burst of 1 for all, not enough to elicit any energy discharges, but still the equivalent strength of several adult men. Izuku Midoriya, 4.66 seconds. Mashirao Ojiro, 5.49 second. As Midoriya walked back to rejoin his two unofficial companions, he noticed a bewildered expression on Bakugou's face. Good, that's what I was hoping to see from you. Can't wait to finally smack you in the face with reality later in the test. Test 2, grip strength. Excuse me, you're Midoriya, right? The multi-armed teenager asked from under his mask. Yes, that's me, the brunette said, regarding the other young male. Can I help you? Mizo Shoji, a pleasure to meet you, the mutant said, holding up his grip strength device. If possible, can you keep an eye on this device for me while I'm doing the test? I'd like to concentrate on getting the best score I can, but I have no desire to break it. I'd be happy to, Midoriya responded, taking a position where he could keep a watchful eye on the grip tester as Shoji began to carefully stack his right hands atop each other in the device. Once all 3 right hands were around the pressure sensor, the multi-armed teen squeezed down as hard as he could. His greenette compatriot watched the numbers climb higher, exceeding 500 kilograms before beginning to slow to a halt. Mizo Shoji, 540.0 kilograms. Incredible. Midoriya breathed out in reverent awe. That kind of exerted force could crush some rocks or easily snap limbs. You must be extremely good at controlling your strength to not injure people. Well, yes, I'm very well practiced in self-restraint of many forms, Shoji said, trying hard to ignore the itching sensation of the scars crisscrossing his mouth. If we both survive this assessment test, I hope you wouldn't mind remaining my acquaintance. It would be my pleasure, Shojiku Midoriya replied, a small smile crossing his face. As the taller teen proceeded to a nearby bench to take a water break, the greenette smirked and took hold of his own grip tester. All right, as for me, a little one for all plus reshaping the insides of this device with Overhaul should yield me. Izuku Midoriya, 999.9 kilograms. Jackpot, the villain leader said, setting his device down and walking away. Shoji, for his part, noticed the inhumanly high score from the bench, his eyes narrowing. I'll have to get closer to you indeed, Midoriya. If not for the sake of liberation, then certainly at least to sate my own curiosity. Test 3, Standing Long Jump. Watching Bakugou clear the sandbox by flying with his explosions, Midoriya reached down inside himself. Guess I have to use the same combination as last time, the greenette thought, once again preparing a small yet still superhuman percentage of one for all. Alongside reaction time to get the right moment to jump. Crouching down at the sandbox's edge, Midoriya channeled one for all into his legs, an applied use of Overhaul allowing him to specifically target the energy flow to the most important ligaments and individual muscle fibers. For a moment, his grip slipped and he briefly glowed, the slight luminescence only visible if you were looking directly at him. Then, he jumped, clearing nearly 3/4 of the sandbox and landing just short of the finish line. Not as good as I'd hoped, but not bad, the greenette said, walking back towards his clique. You are UN amateur, watch and learn. Ayama chuckled, sparkling his way to the sandbox's edge. Turning around, he jumped and fired his laser again in much the same way as he had for the sprint, but because this sandbox was shorter, he was able to clear the whole thing before falling. TCH. Such a show-off, Midoriya teased his cousin as the blonde Frenchman returned, still sparkling. Test 4, Side-to-side jumps. Watching Bakugou use his explosions to propel himself from side to side rapidly, Midoriya got an idea for how to excel at the event. Reaction time to make sure I shoot at the exact right moment, 3% of one for all to generate subtle airbursts. This will require finesse and exact timing, the greenette thought, stepping up and beginning his jumps. After 60 seconds had concluded, he finally came to a stop, panting for breath. That was unpleasant, he muttered, returning to his group and squatting down to take a breather. Little did he notice Bakugou glaring at him. I did 96 jumps in 60 seconds according to that robot, yet somehow Deku managed 64? That shouldn't be possible for a quirkless loser like him. Even the ones here with weak quirks only hit high 40s, the blonde simmered, determined to get to the bottom of this. Test 5, Ball Throw. Infinity, the entire class shouted in astonishment after Uraraka sent it hurtling into the stratosphere. Whoops, the brunette laughed nervously, stepping back into the crowd. She wasn't alone. However, the same kind of surprise was seen when a dark-haired girl named Yurorozu formed a cannon from her torso and launched the ball over a kilometer, or when the shy, stone-faced mutant named Koda called a mighty eagle in to carry his ball a similar distance. As Midoriya was going up, however, he felt danger sense ping right before something wrapped around his arm. Turning to his right, the teen realized a portion of Aizawa's scarf had grabbed him, revealing a pair of protective yellow goggles beneath. Midoriya, you're Not displaying the kind of power I've come to expect after watching your performance in the entrance exam, his teacher said, a hint of disappointment in his tone. If you're holding back because this seems like a game to you, you should go home. Holding back? Bakugou scoffed. As if. How could someone quirkless be holding back? Midoriya chuckled. Sorry, Aizawa-sensei. Contrary to what that firecracker has to say, we both know I'm not quirkless, the greenette said. However, I did only recently develop it. And was mostly running on adrenaline during the exam, so in the interest of self-control and avoiding outright self-harm, I try to limit it to lower percentages. With that said, I'll be happy to demonstrate my full capabilities in this test to satisfy your curiosity. Aizawa smirked. That's an acceptable answer this time, but if I don't see meaningful progress over the course of the semester, you'll find yourself on the chopping block quickly. The pro said, handing Midoriya a softball. Go ahead and make your throw. Stepping up into the circle, Midoriya concentrated on his stockpile of quirks. So I get to show off this time, huh? A smile grew on his face as he selected and synergized the quirks he wanted for this test. Aside from one for all itself at 80%, I'll need shock absorption to manage the blowback, overhaul and regeneration on standby to fix my arm. And I'll coat my arm under my jacket sleeve to act as a brace. Opening his eyes and drawing his arm back, Midoriya leapt forward, landing on his left foot. As he swung his right arm to throw the ball. How's this for quirkless, Bakugou? Seattle. Smash. The moment the ball left his hand, a shockwave roared across the athletic grounds, rattling windows in their frames across the entire UA campus. As the dust cleared, the students raised their gazes to the sky just in time to see a small flash of white disappear from their view into one of the clouds in the atmosphere. 3.14 kilometers, Aizawa said, a cat-like grin spreading across his face. This kid. The sounds of explosions caught both men's ears, causing them to turn in time to see an angry red-eyed blur launching itself at them. Deku, you bastard. How dare you lie about being quirkless all these years? Bakugou roared. Before he could get any closer, however, the blast suddenly cut off and Bakugou found himself ensnared in Aizawa's scarf. What? Where did my quirk go? I erased it, Aizawa said simply. Attempt to assault your classmate one more time, and you will be expelled. As he deactivated his quirk and released the sulking blonde, Aizawa turned to Midoriya. Can you explain what he meant by quirkless, Midoriya? The greenette internally smirked, having prepared for this eventuality. I would be happy to. Sensei. My quirk is an accumulation-type energy stockpiling ability, similar to how the BMI hero fat gum accumulates body weight. I accumulate raw energy through exercise, eating or rest, Midoriya said. Because it had such stringent activation requirements. However, I wasn't even aware that I had it until last October, and it injured me on my first use. Because I wasn't yet used to its blowback. Holding his arm out, Midoriya applied a little bit of smokescreen to give the illusion that it was steaming. I've learned a few nifty tricks with this stockpiling power though, including that I can redirect it to specific parts of my body for healing. My arm is pretty sore right now, but by the end of these tests it should be back to normal. Fascinating, Ida muttered. So cool, crossed the minds of Uraraka and Ashido. Just like at the exam, that power has the same pressure as All Might Todoroki thought. Grimacing slightly. He didn't lie to me. What the hell? Bakugou glowered. Good enough, Midoriya, but I'd better see improvement soon if you're to stay in the hero course, Aizawa said, hiding a small smile within his scarf. You may return to the group. Test 6, Distance Run. Now that he was no longer being slightly vindictive towards his childhood bully, Midoriya felt comfortable with opening the floodgates a little more, channeling around 3%. Of One for All, the greenette seemed to glow a light viridian as he casually jogged around the track, the stockpiled strength of 8 users before him keeping him from feeling even remotely tired. realizing that there was a good opportunity to also build muscle tone here. Midoriya activated Great Gains again and continued running, the exercise Quirk optimizing the slow tear and repair process of his leg and core muscles. Nearby, Uraraka huffed and puffed, as even removing the gravity from her clothing to reduce weight did little to help her keep moving. Even her improved physique from several years of professional burglary wasn't enough to make it a cakewalk in the slightest. Ayama was sitting on a nearby bench, having been unable to continue after a second lap around the track. Midoriya smirked as he realized that Bakugou was not far ahead of him and slowing down as his sweat glands demanded more water to keep making explosions. "On your left," the brunette said as he passed the panting blonde. A litany of very creative curses exploded into existence behind Midoriya, but Bakugou's failure to catch up an attempt to beat him into the dirt clearly meant that the eternal pain in his rear was getting tired. Test 7. Seated toe touch. Extending his arms forward under Ayama's watchful gaze, Midoriya's flexibility gained from repeated training. Getting the living hell beaten out of him, with his mother, allowed him to reach forward to fairly easily grasp the handgrips placed between his feet to measure whether or not he could feasibly touch his toes. Mission accomplished, Ayama-kun, the brunette said, standing back up. "How did I do?" "Well, you get points for style with that stretch, Midoriya, but not the way she does," Ayama said, gesturing to Ashido. The pink-skinned teen had gracefully stretched her hands well past the tips of her toes in a frightening display of flexibility. In complete contrast next to her, a purple-haired teen with 2 large bags under his eyes barely managed to reach the hand grips. Midoriya whistled. "Consider me impressed," he said, shaking his head. "She has to do some kind of physical hobby to get that elastic, probably breakdancing, yoga, or kickboxing. Were I to be a betting man." Test 8. Situ PS. With Uraraka spotting for him, Midoriya successfully managed 121 sit-ups in a single sitting. One for force endurance and strength enhancement at 4%, allowing him to keep going for nearly as long as he wanted. However, he wasn't the winner of this competition. That honor went to Momo Uriorozu, who created a recliner from her torso and proceeded to continually use its lever system to obtain a score of 145. Also impressive was Bakugou, whose sheer tenacity seemed to scream that he was just trying to outdo the pebble in his path, yet despite his best efforts, he only managed to do 108 sit-ups. "That's everyone now," Aizawa said as the teens gathered in front of their teacher, waiting with bated breath to find out whether or not they were being sent home. Tapping a few buttons on his tablet, the man displayed their results as a hologram for all to see. 1. Momo Uriorozu. 2. Izuku Midoriya. 3. Shoto Todoroki. 4. Katsuki Bakugou. 5. Tenya Ida. 6. Fumikage Tokoyami. 7. Okako Uraraka. 8. Mizo Shoji. 9. Mashirao Ojiro. 10. Ahiro Kirishima. 11. Mina Ashido. 12. Rikido Soto. 13. Koji Koda. 14. Tsuyu Asui. 15. Kyoka Jiro. 16. Hanta Siro. 17. Denki Kaminari. 18. Yuga Aiyama. 19. Toru Hagakure. 20. Hitoshi Shinsu. Aizawa stared at the sleeper-looking violet teen. Hitoshi Shinsu, you, the teacher, began, only for a frown to cross his face. "Wait, how did you even get in here? I read your file and noticed you have an interesting quirk and heroic aspirations, but I also recorded your rejection message myself." Shinsu looked around the field in confusion. "I'm not sure myself, sir," he said, looking at his student ID. "Your message said I was placed in Class 1C, but when I received my list of textbooks, academic preparation packet and identification card, they all said to report to Class 1A for the hero course. I do want to be a hero, but I thought I would have to win the sports festival first." Aizawa barely resisted the urge to facepalm. The rat has his paws all over this for whatever reason, he muttered under his breath, before looking at the class as a whole. Since Shinsu has an interesting academic status, you're all safe. Just get out of here, he sighed, turning and walking back towards the main building. The entire class was silent for a moment before suddenly the tall ravenette girl among them dropped to her knees, an expression of terror on her face. I thought he was bluffing, she said, gasping for air as her breathing rate started to increase. But he actually. I thought I was a goner, Shinsu said, sighing in relief. As I said, I want to be a hero, but I'm not even sure how I got into the hero course. I know I only managed to break 3 robots with a pipe out of desperation, and I only got 15 rescue points. Deciding to intervene before their classmate completely hyperventilated, Midoriya placed a hand on Yorozu's shoulder. It's okay, everyone makes mistakes. What's important is that he let us all stay, even though we were all at risk of failure if we didn't do well enough. Helping her up, he introduced himself to her. Izuku Midoriya, at your service. The girl smiled softly. Momo Yorozu, pleased to meet you, she said, bowing slightly. Yorozu, her? The only person to have performed better than I did on this test. I could probably have beaten her if I wasn't so focused on embarrassing Bakugou, Midoriya thought to himself, trying not to scowl. I can't let my vindictive side dictate things for me. Otherwise I'll fail as both a hero and a villain. With that in mind, however, the greenette did allow himself a slight smirk when he saw Bakugou storming back to the lockers, surrounding himself in a cloud of profanity. Serves him right. So this is him. He doesn't look very impressive. A resounding smack rang out across the courtyard in front of UA as Uraraka slapped the blonde teenager that had joined her, Aoyama, Hagakure and Midoriya on their way out of school for the day. Behave, Nito, she warned. Midoriya decided to break the awkward tension as best he could. Nice to meet you, I'm Izuku Midoriya. Are you the other hero course student that Uraraka and Hagakure know? From extracurriculars? The blonde coughed in surprise. Of course. We're proud members of a baking and cooking group dash, he began, only to be cut off by Uraraka again. Meet Nito Monoma, egotist, narcissist and also Kid Lupin of the Peerless Legacy, she said, even as Monoma squawked indignantly. Why did you blow my cover like that? Inversion, the blonde demanded. This is the guy that hired Sako-san, Manama-san and Tobita-san a year ago, Uraraka said, jamming a thumb in Midoriya's direction. Prometheus, meet Ghost and Kid Lupin, 2 of the Legacy's more notorious young members. Wait, his Prometheus? Hagakure spoke up. I knew he was in the loop on who we are. Somehow, but I didn't realize that Midoriya was the guy who hired us to help take down the Hisashi. Wait, how does Frenchie factor into this then? Monoma asked, looking at Aoyama. He's a member of the League, Midoriya said quickly. Aoyama himself blinked in surprise. I am. The greenette sighed. You work for my father, you might as well be an honorary member, he said, slinging an arm around Aoyama's shoulders and yielding a yelp of surprise from the French blonde. The group reached the bottom of the stairs leading down from UA to Musutafu proper, and the 3 disguised thieves turned towards the left. We've got to catch the train now, see you, Midoriya-kun, Uraraka said, waving goodbye to the league's leader. Later, Midoriya, Hagakure added. See you later? Monoma's farewell came out as more of a question than an exclamation. I should depart too. Aoyama said, starting to follow them. A hand clamped down on his shoulder. Now, cousin, why don't you stay for dinner? I think a nice family reunion is in order. Midoriya said, a menacing look on his face. Maybe you and your cher uncle can explain why he wanted you to spy on me. Aoyama started to sweat under Midoriya's gaze for a moment, quickly yielding. Mon Dayu. Fine. I'll come along, he shouted. The greenette laughed. That's what I thought. Chapter end notes. I'm sorry, everyone. November was a long and busy month for me, and now, a month after the planned release date, I finally have Chapter 12 to give to you appropriately. Enough on the 12th of December. I had a lot going on, reporting work on many events, Thanksgiving. The week I took off from most of my projects to celebrate turning 21, and graduate school applications. But that's over. I'm free to write again, hopefully. In this chapter, Nezu noticed an interesting pattern among the incoming class of hero students and opted to let his curiosity take control over his rationality. Aizawa's assessment test was passed by 19 out of 20 students, and the 20th only remained in because of Nezu's aforementioned nonsense. Midoriya now knows every peerless legacy operative at UA. This is a surprise tool that will help us later. Ayama and Hisashi have a lot of explaining to do. Next chapter should hopefully be out by Christmas. Thanks again for reading, and as ever, share, comment, leave kudos favorite. Happy holidays. DVD 181. Chapter Notes. Trial by Battle. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter 13. Trial by Battle. Day 2 of the new semester at UA High School. I'm not sure what I expected from Hero School, and I knew I'd probably have a romanticized view of it before I became acquainted with UA's intricacies. Midoriya sighed internally. But algebra? Seriously? Looking around 1A and seeing several of his classmates with similar looks of suffering on their faces, the greenette let a small smile cross his face. Well, I guess it can't all be breaking robots. We do need to know these basic life skills, after all. As Midoriya had learned over the past 24 hours, Ultra Academia High School was a remarkably efficient institution in the design of its curriculum and day-to-day operations, in addition to being a veritable fortress in security. The first-year hero course was by far the smallest, with only 40 students, allowing special attention to be paid to it with a select faculty of well-respected and capable pro-heroes teaching mathematics, ectoplasm, whose cloning ability allowed him to teach every math class in the school simultaneously, art and aesthetics, midnight, foreign linguistics, present MIC, and literature and communications. Cementos. However, the hero course was hardly the only one to get massive amounts of funding and academic investment per student. General education was a significantly larger department. The largest on campus, in fact, with 300 first-year students across 3 classes. This was not simply a group of hero course rejects, as some may have thought, but was in fact an excellent college preparatory program whose alumni had gone on to include some of mankind's few post-Quirk astronauts, Nobel Prize winners, life-saving physicians and venerated public servants. The first-year support course was roughly in between heroics and general education in size, with 120 students spread across 3 classes. Each of those 3 classes had a different focus from the others. Class F was focused on biology and chemical engineering, Class G was a more generic mechanical engineering and lifestyle technology class, and Class H was specifically focused on hero support technologies. This department was led by Higari Power Loader Maijima, a talented mechanical engineer and support specialist who was also the homeroom instructor for 1H. Finally, the first-year business course was of the same 120 student class size as support, with each of its 3 classes also focusing on something unique. Class 1 was focused on heroics marketing and public relations, which often resulted in second and third-year students forming business relationships with one or more heroic students of the same grade. Class J was a venture capital and business administration class that frequently worked with the Musutafu Chamber of Commerce to give hands-on experience in investing, business management and marketing to its students. Finally, Class K was a course that was meant to fast-track into a collegiate pre-law course, frequently with something of a corporate securities business law focus. Although the heroics course was the only one to be exclusively taught by openly costumed pro-heroes, every single member of the general education, support, and business faculty Also held a pro-hero license and was authorized to make arrests and use their quirk in public, if need be. Just by doing some cursory internet research, Midoriya had found out that there were some truly terrifying quirks among the faculty of the other departments, ranging from a teacher who could turn classroom chalk into explosive missiles to someone with a ridiculous physical enhancer quirk that gave them the aura of a legendary dragon. UA truly is a fortress, the Greenette thought as the bell rang to signal the end of Ectoplasm's class. That may be either a blessing or a curse, since I need to get Himiko in here tomorrow to snatch a copy of the class schedule for Operation Debut. The rest of the school day continued much the same for the hero students of 1A as it would have been for an average first year at UA High School. However, as the 20 aspiring public guardians would soon find out, they had an extra period at the end of their school day. For good reason, that reason being their foundational heroics course, a first-year introductory course to the ins and outs of the hero profession. Since it was generally a detailed and intensive course, it took up the final 3 periods of their school day twice per week. I wonder who our teacher is going to be. Uraraka wondered as one sat waiting for their final period to start. Hopefully it's someone from the top 10. Kaminari added. I just hope they'll be a good teacher, Ida said, polishing his glasses. It'll probably be someone retired who can focus on us a little more than an active duty hero. Asui gave her 2 cents on the situation. It'll be All Might, but don't quote me on that, Midoriya chuckled. A couple of his classmates gave him weird looks, especially Bakugou, but nobody rebuffed him, or knew how right he was. Settle down, class, Aizawa sighed, stepping into the classroom. Several of the more excited students immediately quieted and resisted the urge to groan at their homeroom teacher's arrival for their new class. Today, we have someone new joining us as your new foundational heroics teacher. Since he is new, I will be acting as a teaching assistant today to prevent any accidents and give him pointers when necessary. The door to the classroom opened, and Midoriya had to suppress the urge to giggle when a familiar blonde scarecrow stepped through the door. Good afternoon, Class 1A, the skinny man said, setting a thick binder on the podium as he stepped up next to Aizawa. My name is Toshinori Yagi. I am a former pro hero who was injured in the line of duty and subsequently served until recently as the secretary-manager of the mighty agency in Roppongi. That bit of information sent murmurs around the class, realizing that their new teacher knew the symbol of peace on a personal level, albeit more personal than most of them knew. Between my time as a pro and my post-injury career running an agency, I've managed and trained hundreds of heroes and helped them to launch their careers while aiding All Might in keeping the peace nationally for the past 29 years. The man sighed slightly, barely keeping a cough in check. And now, just when I was looking forward to retirement, Nezu brought me on to teach all of you. This class will cover many topics, from basic hero lore and ethics to combat and rescue training. You will all come out of this first school year with a better understanding of the core tenets of heroism and be prepared to better keep the peace in Japan for the foreseeable future. The classroom remained silent for a moment before Midoriya began to clap, the rest of his classmates soon joining him. The Greenette didn't miss the appreciative look his mentor directed towards him for breaking the ice, and allowed himself a soft smile in return. No problem, Yagi-sensei. Pressing a button on the remote for the digital blackboard, Yagi added a bit of his showman's charm as he presented the title of the day's training with a flourish. Today's exercise will be a trial by fire for some of you zygotes, a battle trial. Pointing to the back of the classroom, the symbol of peace grinned as 20 numbered lockers opened from the wall. You all submitted support forms before school started to help construct your hero costumes, and now your requests have been answered. Put your costumes on and report to Eraserhead and I in 10 minutes to training ground beta. My expectations were high, but you've successfully beaten them. You all look so cool, Yagi said as his 20 students walked into the control room of training ground beta, the Same mock cityscape where a certain villainaire had punched out an executor bot just a month or two earlier. High praise from you, Yaga-sensei, Midoriya thought, coming to a stop and taking a moment to admire the costumes of himself and those around him. The teen himself was dressed in a forest green jumpsuit with black and red highlights, while a pair of oversized white gauntlets covered his forearms and hands, and his feet were adorned with modified versions of his favorite red high tops with spring-loaded iron soles and a hidden blade in the toe of each for emergencies. This costume was secretly designed by himself and was loaded with hidden gadgets and weaponry, including features that aided the use of the quirks he had stored within. All for one of his father's many business fronts had taken the contract for building the costume and allowed him to design in the numerous secret features as he had intended. Checking out his classmates, he noticed a few interesting outfits among his classmates. Bakugou's distinctly resembled one he had designed for the explosive blonde as a child, right down to the grenade-shaped explosive gauntlets. This thought made him grimace slightly and decide to move on from thinking too heavily about their shared past. The tailed boy, Ojiro, if he remembered right, wore seemingly a simple martial arts gi, but a quick activation of an X-ray vision quirk revealed a fairly impressive bullet and knife-resistant polymer inner lining, and a very sturdy-looking collapsible bow staff. Yama, meanwhile, was bedecked in some sort of night outfit complete with a giant cape that the greenette wanted to facepalm at. Remembering the wise words of a certain costume designer from a pre-Quirk superhero movie his dad had shown him, Shinsu was wearing an interesting bodysuit with lightweight ceramic and polymer armor, covering key parts of his body, while a curious mask covered the lower half of his face. A quick use of X-ray vision showed ceramic plates with potentially interesting acoustic properties, probably to aid his quirk. A pair of eskrima sticks hung off the sides of his waist for melee combat purposes. Uraraka's outfit, on the other hand, consisted of a pink and black flight suit with a dusty brown and white aviator's jacket over it. 3 decorative stars adorned one side of her collar, while large pink and white gauntlets and boots covered her arms and legs. To protect her head, the thief wore a cushioned black aviator cap with pink acrylic glasses to cover her eyes. Yagi's introductory lecture called the teen back to attention. Today's combat training scenario is a pretty simple classic that is a staple of old action films, he said, pulling up a slide depicting the scenario on a big screen behind him. A pair of villains have barricaded themselves inside an office building with a very powerful conventional warhead, threatening to destroy the city within 15 minutes if their demands are not met. Their opponents are a pair of heroes who were paired together by chance due to the extreme personnel demands of a crisis like this. Aizawa stepped forward. The win conditions are simple and stacked somewhat in favor of the villain team. If the villains capture both heroes or run down the clock, they win. If the heroes capture both villains or the weapon, they win. Destruction of the device will be an immediate loss for the hero team since it will mean much of the city was leveled in the blast. Now step up and draw lots to see who you'll be paired with. A quick game of chance later, and the teams and matchups were decided. The first villain team, Team C, was guided to the building alongside their hero opponents, Team J, by Aizawa, as the rest of the class and Yagi took seats to watch the showdown. The villain team consisted of Yuriorozu and Shinsu, who were led inside to begin their 10 minutes of preparation while the hero team of Zero and Kirishima waited outside. I'll be very surprised if Yuriorozu and Shinsu don't win, Midoriya said, pulling his notebook and pen out of his pocket dimension quirk. And can you tell us why that is, Midoriya? Yagi asked, a knowing twinkle in his eye. Nearby Bakugou bristled at the sight of one of his childhood nemesis's stalker notebooks. 2 reasons. First of all, quirks Yuriorozu and Shinsu's quirks are both enormously versatile and, in the former's case, absolutely busted in how they can be used. Zero's tape may be a complicating factor that forces them to improvise, and Kirishima's appears to make him a powerhouse in close combat, but the kind of traps that can be made when you have access to any material and the ability to brainwash someone just by talking to them are borderline terrifying. Murmurs spread throughout the class as Midoriya's words washed over them. The greenette smirked. They seem uncomfortable. Good. Wait until they hear this next part. And what's the other? Echoed Aizawa's voice from the back of the classroom. Strategy, Midoriya said, setting the notebook down. Yurorozu seems like she's intellectually gifted and likely a very dangerous tactician, especially when given time to prepare. Shinsu doesn't seem like a slouch either and certainly seems capable of following any plan she creates, since he doesn't seem to have an ego that would prevent him from sticking to a plan. The villain heir resisted the urge to chuckle when he heard Bakugou growl. From that statement. By comparison, Kirishima seems to be a very straightforward person. And if my read on him is correct, we'll charge right in because that's the manly thing to do. Zero is the true wildcard here, since his personality seems more unpredictable and he may scale the building from the outside to attack the weapon room directly. Alarm klaxons rang to signal the start of the exercise, and Midoriya sighed when Kirishima immediately hardened his body and ran headlong into the building, shouting about how a man should face challenges directly. Unsurprisingly, he was quickly caught in a pitfall trap that glued him in place with polymer fibers. Zero took a less predictable route himself, but was caught when Shinsu tricked him into responding with a knock-knock joke and quickly wrapped him in capture tape. Overall, the battle trial was over in 4 minutes and 8 seconds in a total victory for the villain team. Yurorozu was named MVP. This battle somewhat set the tone for the next few battles. In Match 2, the heroes of Team H, consisting of Fumikage Tokoyami and Tsuyu Asui, fairly quickly defeated the villains of Team F, Rikido Soto and Koji Koda. The battle was actually fairly even at first, with Soto evenly trading blows against Tokoyami's fearsome dark shadow quirk, but once his mental state cratered with his quirk's sugar crash drawback, Asui used him as a human projectile and disabled the fleeing Koda, capturing them both. For this, she was named MVP of the match. Match 3, however, was much more contentious. The heroes of Team G initially had an easy entry, with Kyoka Jiro's enhanced hearing guiding her and Denki Kaminari on a fairly direct route towards the weapon room that had been chosen by the villains of Team B. However, that easy entry was derailed when Tenya Ida confronted the two of them, forcing Kaminari to stay behind and fight him off while Jiro continued onwards to face Mizo Shoji. In the weapon room, Kaminari and Ida's fight ended in a double KO when the speedster knocked his opponent out but immediately fell victim to an electricity discharge that went straight through his conductive metal armor, leaving him unable to move. While Aizawa collected some medical bots to help him with the two incapacitated students, Jiro and Shoji duked it out in a fight that was fairly even, trading physical blows and sonic attacks. Ultimately, the multi-armed teen connected with a lucky hit that sent Jiro flying into a fall, knocking her into a daze long enough for him to tie her up. "I'm sorry, Kyoka-san, all for the cause of liberation," he murmured as Yagi's voice signified his team's victory. 2. Nobody's surprise, the Violet Girl earned the MVP award for that match. In the fourth battle of the day, the heroes of Team I defeated the villains of Team E with almost hilarious ease. It was little wonder that Ashido was surprised when Hagakyu refracted Ayama's laser beam directly into her, then punched the Frenchman in the stomach before racing over and capturing the bomb. Poor Ojiro barely had a chance to do anything, and immediately nominated Hakagyur to be MVP, but he was almost thankful for his experience by the end of the day. An hour earlier. Finally, for Match 5, Okako Uraraka and Izuku Midoriya, the heroes of Team A, will face Katsuki Bakugou and Shoto Todoroki, the villains of Team D. Yagi had announced. Bakugou felt a feral grin cross his face at the prospect of finally being able to grind that filthy Lying pebble Deku into dust and have it be school-sanctioned, no less. That smile dropped slightly when he turned to face his foe and realized that the damned nerd also had a vicious grin on his face and was clearly looking forward to the fight. Meanwhile, Shoto Todoroki stared down his soon-to-be opponents. The gravity user is irrelevant. My goal here is to crush the miniature All Might. He will be simply another obstacle I freeze to the bone. Back in the present. Alarm klaxons sounded once more, signaling the start of the final match of the day. Up on the top floor of the office building, the villain team had just finished their preparations, which consisted of Todoroki freezing the bomb in place while Bakugou angrily paced back and forth. What is our plan? The heterochromic boy finally broke his silence, eliciting a growl from Bakugou as the blonde spun around. You can sit here and twiddle your thumbs as much as you want, icy hot, because I'm gonna go beat the crap out of Deku and Roundface and get us the win, right here, right now, he roared, sprinting out the door as the alarms went off. Todoroki sighed slightly. I'll look forward to getting to face Midoriya in a few minutes. Then he said, frost rapidly creeping up the walls around him as he began to freeze the whole room. Back down at the entrance, Midoriya grinned as Uraraka took hold of his hand and removed her own gravity. Ready? The brunette grinned. I was born ready. With one deft movement, the greenette lobbed his partner high in the air, giving her a good vantage point to descend onto the rooftop while he himself rushed in. This was the crux of their plan, divide and conquer, the second most efficient of the 5 plans he'd devised for their victory. The most efficient would have involved him and Uraraka both going via the roof and sneaking up on Todoroki, but then he wouldn't have gotten a chance to confront Bakugou, and where was the fun in that? Speaking of Bakugou, the blonde devil himself leapt out from the shadows into Midoriya's field of view with an explosion ready. The other teen had already detected him via danger sense, however, and evaded the concussive attack by sliding underneath in on his knees before skidding to a stop and turning to face his foe. No more running and no more lying, Deku Bakugou growled, his palm beginning to smoke. Today I'm going to take you down for good and get some goddamned answers about how long you've been lying to me. Time to die. How very heroic of you, Kaken the greenette responded, cracking his knuckles and watching a vein contort on his opponent's forehead from the use of that old nickname. I'm pretty sure I already explained my quirk status to the whole class, but that's not why I'm here. The reason I went this way instead of just helping Uraraka jump Todoroki and leaving you to spin down here, is because I feel a little vindictive today. Shut up. Shut up. Bakugou roared. I don't care about any of that, the old status quo between us comes back today. You see, that's the thing. The reason I came this way was because of that little status quo. You mentioned, Midoriya said, a dangerous glow becoming visible from his eyes. For the past 11 fucking years, you spat on our former friendship at every possible turn, reminding me of something out of my control at every possible turn with heat and noise. I imagine you'd have been pretty pissed if you'd been in my shoes for that long, and now? Now it's my turn. Shut up and die, you damned pebble. Bakugou roared, launching himself forward with another explosion and readying a powerful blast to punish his opponent. Danger Sense saw an attack this telegraphed coming from a mile away and within a blink of an eye the greenette had moved out of the way, bringing a knee strike with about 2.5% of 1 for all in it up directly into the blonde's stomach. Oof, he had just enough time to choke out as the air was forced from his lungs, before a hand roughly grabbed the collar of his shirt. What the foo dash, he shouted, before that turned to a cry of pain when Midoriya drove a ferocious headbutt directly into his nose, a loud crunch signifying the appendage breaking. Ouch. Kaminari winced, watching Midoriya break Bakugou's nose. Midoriya's a beast. Isn't he? That was so brutal and so very manly, Kirishima commented, his nose stinging sympathetically. Wonder what Bakugou said to piss him off like that. Status quo, huh? Gyro wondered, her sensitive hearing having picked up the conversation. From afar. If I had to guess, Bakugou may have bullied Midoriya once upon a time. With hindsight, he shouldn't have done that. Why the fuck is he so strong? Bakugou wondered, pain blinding his senses as his enraged ex-friend lifted him up by one arm and hurled him down the hallway. Damn it dash. His defiant shout was cut off as he hit a wall back first. His senses screamed at him and he barely scrambled out of the way as a kick covered in green electricity smashed the wall. Where he'd just been. In desperation, the blonde lit up the most powerful blast he could muster at that instant, just for the sake of getting Midoriya away from him. Stumbling back to his feet, Bakugou took a fighting stance as the smoke cleared to reveal an unharmed Midoriya. You sure were hiding a monster of a secret quirk there, Deku, but I can do better, he roared, unleashing two enormous blasts from his palms. Bazooka. Deluxe. The titanic blast engulfed the hallway, and when it cleared, the greenette's skin was smoking in some spots, showing that the healing aspect of his quirk was active. You remember this design from our childhood, don't you? Bakugou said, raising one of his gauntlets up to the light. As you know, I sweat something akin to nitroglycerin, and these gauntlets store the excess sweat from when I fight and allow me to unleash it all at once. Hooking one thumb into the pin on the side, the blonde aimed the accessory at his opponent. You know what that means, don't you, nerd? Bakugou, don't you dare dash. Aizawa started, only to be cut off by the pin's removal and Bakugou's shout. He won't die if he dodges. A titanic blast of heat, light and force engulfed the hallway, rattling the entire training ground and blowing a huge hole in the side of the office building. When the smoke cleared, Midoriya was nowhere to be seen, and all that remained was a perfectly circular hole where the corridor used to be. Aizawa's voice crackled over the intercom. The exercise is over, use of lethal force against a fellow student is not tolerated dash. Wait. Yagi shouted. Is that dash? A piercing noise was the only warning Bakugou got before a green blur appeared out of nowhere in front of him, grabbed his face and slammed him into the floor. As the blissful grip of unconsciousness greeted him with open arms, only one thought echoed through his mind. When did you get so strong? Katsuki Bakugou has been incapacitated. Aizawa's voice rang out across the training ground. Switching his intercom off, he turned to Yagi, who had a grim look on his face. We're going to have to nip that problem child's violent streak in the bud as soon as possible. He ground out softly. The incognito symbol of peace nodded. I agree. We're very lucky he used that attack on someone with the raw power needed to tank it. If he'd fired that at anyone else here other than young Todoroki or maybe young Kirishima, we'd be dealing with a homicide today and a giant black mark on Yue's reputation. Glad that he and Yagi were on the same page, he'd recently found that the man who seemed to be an insufferable blowhard on TV was actually a surprisingly rational individual behind the mask. The Erasure hero turned to watch as Midoriya arrived to rendezvous outside the weapon room with Uraraka. Good job, Midoriya-kun. The brunette thief congratulated her partner. I fought Todoroki for as long as I could, but I think he got tired of me pelting him with loose objects and froze the entire room shut. I think he wants to run down the clock. I see, the brunette said, stepping up to the door and readying another strength combo. Thank you for fighting him on your own for so long. The second I blow this wall open, you need to be ready to bolt for the bomb. You ready? I was born ready, she responded, giving him a determined grin in response. Good. In that case. Lafayette smash. Midoriya roared, delivering a OFA-charged big boot kick that shattered the ice shell into a million cubes. The explosion revealed a shocked Todoroki, the heterochromic teen's eyes widening in horror as the miniature All Might in his class exploded into his fortress of solitude with one attack, the gravity user right behind him. I won't let you, the ice user all but whispered as he stomped his foot, sending a glacial wave directly at his opponents. Uraraka dodged to one side and began floating as many pieces of icy debris as possible to guard herself with, thin wires shooting out of her aviator jacket to anchor to them as she ran towards the bomb. Meanwhile, Midoriya's facial expression hardened and his fists glowed again as he dished out a blindingly fast rapid-fire combo of punches to break apart the icy barrier. Hawaiian smashes. To Todoroki's horror, the attack began to eat away at his constantly expanding glacier, grinding down the ice sheet so fast that a pile of almost powdered snow was left behind him, blowing around and accumulating in the hallway outside. In the veritable indoor blizzard, the Scion of Endeavor never noticed how the ice around the bomb was shattered as Uraraka lobbed her satellites at it. Okako Uraraka has secured the bomb. The hero team wins, Aizawa's voice echoed across the training ground as the gravity user secured the weapon with a single touch. Todoroki whirled around to see her sheepishly wave at him, while Midoriya landed in front of him. Good job, Todoroki-san, the brunette said, excitement creeping into his voice. Your quirk is incredible, to say the least. Can you shape your ice or condense it at all? What are your limits? How about exotic forms of ice? Can you dash? I do not feel like taking questions today, the two-tone teen said, exiting the room silently. Midoriya stared after him for a moment, while Uraraka voiced what they were both thinking. What's his problem? This brings an end to our first foundational heroics course of the new year, Yagi addressed his class once they were all together once more. Some were definitely in better shape than others. Bakugou, for instance, had a large bandage wrapped around his head, while Ida and Kaminari were both clearly rattled still after their double KO. Now that the exercise is over, we have a few key points we want you to take away, including one we didn't anticipate having to discuss. Aizawa coughed. First of all, and I really should not have to say this, but do not use lethal force unless absolutely necessary, and especially not on a classmate in a training exercise. The man's eyes flashed red as he singled out the person this was most specifically targeted at. Bakugou, you are incredibly lucky that Midoriya was strong enough to survive an attack like that, otherwise, you would be on your way to prison right now for murder. The blonde gulped at that realization, while several of his classmates side-eyed him warily. Because you didn't actually kill anyone, however, you're getting off lucky. Those gauntlets are being removed from your costume indefinitely and you will have detention during lunch tomorrow. Am I clear? Yes sir, the blonde gritted out. Good. Moving on to our second point, unpredictability and creativity are some of the biggest strengths a hero can have when engaging in a combat situation. Your opponent may be stronger than you, faster than you, or have a more versatile quirk than you, but if you can outthink them, you can even the odds or even stack them in your favor. Take me for instance, Eraserhead said, drawing a pair of golden goggles up from around his neck. I use these to prevent my opponents from telling where I'm looking or if my quirk is active. It's saved my life in larger firefights on a couple occasions. As the class nodded in understanding, Yagi took to the podium. Finally, the third lesson. Trust in your fellow heroes. It's impossible to do everything at once on your own in a situation like the one you were given today, so relying on your partner and communicating clearly with them was key. As an example, Gyro and Kaminari almost won against opponents who were physically stronger and faster than they were because they trusted each other to fulfill their part of the plan and reach the objective. Spreading his arms wide, the incognito symbol addressed his students. Take all these lessons to heart, and you'll be well on your way to being some of the finest peacekeepers this world has ever seen. Smiling, he turned to Aizawa, who gave him a rare grin of approval. Class is now dismissed. That evening, in a bar in Yokohama. How'd it go today, little brother? Tenko asked the second that Izuku walked through one of Oboro's portals into the League's hideout. The white-haired young adult was peering deep into his old-fashioned, probably searching for some hidden wisdom within the depths of the delicious mix of whiskey, orange bitters, and simple syrup. Not bad. Small might is my heroics teacher the greenette said. Small might? Tenko inquired, an eyebrow raised. His skinny form from after he and Dad beat each other up, Izuku explained, getting a quiet expression of understanding from his brother. Also, Bakugou tried to kill me today, not even joking, and I fought That blonde Pomeranian bitch did what? Himiko shouted, walking into the room. I ought to go stab him right now Easy, easy, Miko-chan, Izuku said, calming her down. Uncle Yoichi's quirk was a major help. I barely got hurt even before super regeneration kicked in, and then I knocked him out in one hit. The blonde girl sighed in relief, setting down the knife she'd just picked up. And finally, I got to fight Endeavor's youngest kid. There's something wrong with him. Though, I'll have to crack that mystery open during the sports festival, though, the greenette sighed, pondering his brother's drink for a moment. Oboro-san, a ginger ale if you would be so kind. Almost immediately a beautifully assembled ginger ale in a fluted glass was set in front of him, a garnish of orange peel floating alluringly at the top. You know me so well, the teen chuckled. How's the preparation going? Recruitment is pretty much done, Tenko said. Our network of random low-level nobodies with significant potential gets bigger every time we do one of these jobs, I swear. Anyone interesting? Izuku queried, sipping his ginger ale. I know we've hired Hagakyu-chan and Uraraka-san for this job, just so they'll play along during the incident, and we're bringing the Reservoir Dogs and Cider House back on for this job. Mr. Sludge would have been nice to get too, but I didn't want to force him out of retirement like that. Well, aside from him, we've got a handful of petty thieves and the occasional mugger or public nuisance for the USJ itself, Tenko replied. Some of these people we found through Jiran for a minimal cost, while others we recruited on our own. I recruited Marshall Hare and Gravitational Spring at a cafe I frequent, Himiko said, sipping a Virgin Bloody Mary, yes, one made with actual blood. And for that matter, one-eyed. Green Dragon is one of the data guys for the party. I am once again refusing to acknowledge that you two and Dad went into politics behind my back, Izuku grumbled, right as Jin walked through the door. Good evening, everyone, the man said, a big smile on his face. Suddenly, his expression grew sour. Nobody cares, losers. Gentlemen, please, the man said in a third, slightly different voice. This was the result of his change in outlook over the years. His split personalities had never actually reunited and instead reached an equilibrium, with a third personality developing that resembled how he was before his mind broke. They referred to themselves collectively as Twice or Booba Gaiwara, but the pessimist one went by Left Jin, the optimist by Right Jin, and the normal one who typically took the driver's seat as just Jin. Good evening, Twice-san, Oboro said, pouring the man a White Russian. Just the way you like it. F. Charisto Twice responded. The rest of the group briefly glanced at him for his use of Greek in thanks, but quickly turned back to their business as Tenko shrugged slightly. Twice was a man who definitely had his quirks, pun fully intended, and the league liked him all the better for it. Victor is also a pretty neat dude. Turns out he's the GameStop clerk I've been playing Earth Defense Force with recently, Tenko said. Izuku resisted the urge to roll his eyes. If it wasn't for their father's near-endless resources, the greenette was half sure his cousin adoptive brother would have forked over most of their inheritance to Steam by now. Guys like him are gonna be in the USJ itself, testing the hero trainees, but ultimately doing little more than that before we pull them out. The big key is in phase 1 of the plan, the distraction faction. I was curious about that, Izuku said, finishing his ginger ale. What sort of names did you manage to acquire to distract All Might on Thursday morning? Making sure he doesn't make it is the most critical part of the plan. I know, Tenko cut him off, sighing. Have a little more faith in me, player 2. I managed to recruit some higher caliber villains to distract All Might, though they'll all still go down in one hit, and truthfully, none of them are people I Feel all that bad about getting arrested. Habit headgear, glutton god, Thomas Gordon, cowboy, Emperor Yotsura, thinking of the last group he recruited for the distraction. Faction, he giggled a little. All Might is even gonna have to contend with the 3 Sturm und Drang brothers. Izuku cracked a smile at that one. All Might's core tenets, truth, justice, the American way, and returning stolen undergarments, he chuckled. Yaga-sensei is gonna have his work cut out for him on Thursday, and so is Class 1A. Chapter end notes. Notes. The next chapter should hopefully be out by Christmas. So, that was AF*** King Lai. I'm really, really sorry, everyone. The last 3 months have been very rough between dealing with aging family members, getting a cold, getting the flu, and now getting ready to change jobs as well. I'm not even gonna give a tentative date for the next chapter, because I just know I'm gonna let y'all down if I do. Sorry again in advance. With that out of the way, in this chapter, we learned more about the fortress that is UA. Yagi actually did a good job teaching, though Aizawa is giving him an assist there. Bakugou got a righteous and well-deserved ass-beating, maybe he'll learn something. The USJ attack is starting to come together. Thanks again for reading, hopefully I'll be back soon. DVD 181. Chapter notes. Grand debut. Because I owe y'all a little extra for the months of radio silence, winky face. See the end of the chapter for more. What the fuck? Notes. Chapter 14, Grand Debut. Katsuki Bakugou was already not having a good day, as evidenced by the fact that he was sitting in the teacher's lounge for detention right now for trying to deal with that stupid pebble. His classmate properly during yesterday's exercise. All the media vultures that had been hounding him and the extras outside of the gates that morning had been annoying as all hell, too. And so had all the extras voting Deku as their class's vice president. They made Ponytail president, but at least she wasn't useless or a liar, but none of that fuckery could compare to the shrill sound of an intruder alarm piercing through the school around him. Warning. Level 3 security breach in progress. Evacuate. Immediately. You don't have to tell me twice to get out of this hellscape, the blonde growled, grabbing his backpack and striding over to the door. To his surprise, however, he opened it to see a girl, slightly shorter than him, looking directly at him. Her hair was the same color as his and tied up in a pair of messy buns that fit with the frumpy cardigan and miniskirt she was wearing, while her golden eyes bored into his soul. There you are, she said, a weird fanged grin flashing across her face. Power loader. Sensei sent me to make sure you evacuated right. Come on. The girl grabbed him by the wrist and started running down the hall, dragging him behind her. Hey, wait. Where are you taking me, you crazy dash, he began, only to stop in shock when there was suddenly nobody standing in front of him. He was all alone in a deserted hallway, while sirens echoed around him. Bun bitch. Rubbing his eyes, Bakugou looked up and down the hallway, before shaking his head. Am I going crazy or something? That evening, at a bar in Yokohama. Mission accomplished, Himiko Toga said, brandishing the class schedule at Izuku and Tenko. I nabbed this bad boy out of the teacher's lounge after Dusty here made some noise at the gates. Ran into Blasty McSplode though. It took all I had to not just stab him for what he's done to you, Izuku-an. I'm glad you didn't, Miko-chan. Izuku sighed, sipping his green tea. It would have complicated the plan, and despite what everyone else seems to think, he still has the makings of a great hero if he tries. So forgiving, the blonde girl groaned, lightly tugging at her savior's green locks. Sometimes I wonder if these are all plants and your brain is just tree roots, she giggled. Looking at the schedule, it seems like you'll arrive there at around 13:20 tomorrow, Tenko said, polishing off a margarita. In that case, we'll warp in at 13:25 or so. Of course, we'll have been up since long before then. The distraction faction is getting deployed to cause chaos at 7:30 tomorrow. 7:55 a.m., Musutafu, Missouri, smash. Habit headgear groaned as he fell to the ground, felled by the power of All Might's pimp hand. The symbol of peace effortlessly caught the family of 3 that headgear had been carrying under one arm and deposited them safely back on solid ground. Wow! Kamu Woods gaped in surprise at the man's sheer power and precision. No wonder his number 1, Mount Lady added, still stunned by All Might's sudden intervention. Would you take care of them for me, please? I must go. A hero's duty never stops, the man said, leaping off into the sky. Meanwhile, in Tokyo. And we can now confirm that yet another crime has been quelled this morning in Musutafu. As All Might has easily defeated Cowboy once again and thwarted his attempted theft of every animal in the Musutafu Municipal Zoo, a report crackled over the radio. Good, Hisashi Akatani said, adjusting his fake glasses as he watched the cityscape fly by outside the car, Oboro's careful driving quickly drawing them closer to the national diet. That fool is already burning his time limit out for the day. Seems like my main account has been busy already. The voice of Tomura Shigaraki spoke. Up from the backseat, the late teenager was fiddling with an archaic pre-Quirk handheld video game. Meanwhile, I'm gonna be over here on the alt account listening to a bunch of cringe-ass politicos bitch about some new problem. Are we sure twice Quirk won't cause me to dissolve if I die of boredom? You'll be fine, young Tomura. It'll probably be Fujisaki complaining about housing policy. Again Hisashi laughed, eliciting a groan from the double in the backseat. 1:21 p.m., unforeseen simulation joint, UA High Campus. Aizawa Sensei Asui said, raising her hand. Where is Yaga Sensei today? The Erasure hero resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Yagi is stuck in traffic, he said, thinking briefly of the fool resting in the teacher's lounge back at the main part of campus. He might get the chance to join us later on, but for the time being it'll be just myself and another teacher who supervises this site. Hello, everyone. Speaking of this other member of the faculty, an unfamiliar voice echoed. Around the parking area outside the USJ, a figure covered head to toe in a puffy white space suit waved to the students and Aizawa from the entrance to the building. Oh my god, it S13 Imer Biggest fan dash. Uraraka began to mumble in excitement, the thief's motormouth moving so fast that Midoriya could barely pick out what she was saying. Whoa, slow down, Space Cowgirl, the greenette chuckled, his laughter growing louder when Uraraka turned beet red over his emphasis on her fangirling. Turning to look at the newly introduced faculty member, his eyes narrowed as they followed her inside. The space hero, 13. Real name, Ainen Kuros. A 28-year-old rescue expert with perhaps one of the most dangerous quirks in modern Japan. Her black hole allows her to disintegrate any substance into dust and send it to an unknown location in space-time. At full power, it can even capture light, which means it has some properties of a true black hole. While the hero in question was explaining exactly what he'd just mentally summarized, Midoriya looked upward for a moment. Last year, she took part in JXA's first spacewalk. In almost 70 years, using her quirk to clean up vast quantities of Kessler syndrome debris, and making commercial spaceflight possible once more. 13 truly lives up to her epithet, and that's why she's so dangerous. Anyone who has looked into the cold void of space and come back smiling is someone to be cautious of. A brief buzzing on his wrist caught his attention, and he looked to Uraraka and Hagakure and briefly nodded ever so slightly. The two girls both got the message. It's go time. You'll all be divided into groups and be sent to each of the zones for 15-minute rescue training exercises, Aizawa said, gesturing around the massive space in front of them and all its various biomes. Once you finish in each zone, you'll be given a 5-minute reprieve before moving to the next zone. You'll be graded on teamwork, personal conduct, yes, that was directed at you, Bakugou, timing, and how many of the robots you rescued. 13. Will you do the honors? I'd be delighted, the space hero replied, stepping forward. Unfortunately, 20 students don't divide evenly across 6 disaster zones, so we'll have to dash. 13 stopped as the overhead lights briefly flickered, then shut off entirely. Ah. Sensei, is that part of the exercise? Kaminari asked, pointing at the plaza where a hole had opened in reality, black fog pouring from it and forming a wall across the lower portion of the USJ. Retreat to the doors, now, the Erasure hero said, snapping to attention and leaping in front of his students. This isn't part of the exercise at all, those are real villains. Sure enough, the first figures had begun to walk out of the mist, revealing an assortment of thugs, muggers, and robbers that could occasionally be seen in local newspapers or on TV. After around 3 dozen or so of these various minor villains walked through, however, a significantly more dangerous-looking group arrived through the mist, and Midoriya had to fight down a grin as he realized that their underground support gear supplier had once again more than delivered for them. On the leftmost end of the group, Himiko Toga was dressed in a black school uniform with red highlights, the extra ruffles and lace in a few places making it border on a gothic Lolita aesthetic, if it wasn't for the bulletproof vest she wore over the top of the outfit. Several knives were strapped to her belt and legs, and a large backpack connected to long syringes, and a face mask with the ability to drain blood for future use from her opponents. Twice wore the same costume he ever did, but his wristbands had been upgraded into larger gauntlets to aid his physical abilities and give him better measurement options for his quirk. In each of his hands was a large metal briefcase. Rapper had opted for a similar look, with larger gauntlets but no extra defenses. In his words, a bulletproof vest was cheap and for cowards. He did opt for a new mask, however, to cover his head without the bird aesthetic. Finally, a dozen or so camera drones flew through the portal, followed by none other than Tenko Shimura. The young adult wore a long black duster jacket with a red inside over a bodysuit covered in plate armor made from some lightweight ceramics. The hands of his birth family adorned his body, with his father's hand covering the top of his face while a voice-changing face mask covered his mouth and nose. "Greetings, you annoyingly heroic children," Tenko said, adjusting the volume setting on his mask as a camera drone circled around him. "My name is Decay, Field Commander of the League of Villains. On behalf of our Grand Commander, Prometheus, I'd like to welcome you all to today's guest lecture." Behind him, the mist coalesced into the towering, amorphous form of Kurogiri. "Guest lecture," one of the students shouted down, and Decay's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, guest lecture?" "I'd be delighted to explain," Shimura laughed, the voice changer on his mask increasing the raspiness of his voice. "You see, our leader is a unique fellow. He loves heroes, believe it or not, which is really annoying sometimes, and wants to see them succeed and protect the people of Japan. One small issue, however." The young man spread his arms wide in a presentational flourish. "Most of the heroes being turned out on the streets these days suck at their jobs." "What?" 13 asked in disbelief. "You heard me right. Heroes these days simply don't live up to the legacy All Might has been promoting for the last 30 years, Decay said. "So Prometheus cooked up a really swell plot, and you guys are just the first trainees. He decided that, since the best heroes were bred from the adversity of the era of Chaos, All Might, Crimson Riot, Crust, and to a lesser extent Endeavor, that modern trainees needed that kind of adversity in their lives to be better protectors of the public." "Bullshit," Bakugou roared, feeling personally insulted by that declaration. "Your leader is looking down on me, the next number one? Send him out here. I'll beat his ass dash." "Shut the fuck up, and listen," Decay said, cutting him off. "You're a prime example of what he's worried about, another generation that seems to have bought so much into the style of heroism that they forgot all the substance. What are you here for, the money and fame? You make me sick, and that's why you're all going to be learning this lesson today." Pointing at the camera drone, the man grinned under his mask. "In 90 seconds, we'll be beginning a delayed broadcast of this event on HeroTube and itch for all the world to see. You Heralings are going to be our debut performance, our way to say that we are here, he said, gesturing around the USJ. Your objective is simple, survive the next 15 minutes. Do try not to die on us, kids. I won't let you. 13 began, while Aizawa readied his capture scarf. Kurogiri. Even though he knew to be ready for this, the sensation of suddenly falling as he was wrapped in the black mist still made Midoriya's stomach lurch, his rapid descent through space-time having a disorienting effect that ended as soon as he landed butt-first on the cobblestones of the plaza floor. Game on, Tenko. The outskirts of Musutafu. Oof, the space hero cried as she dropped to the ground, rolling for a moment before catching her fall on a bush. Looking around her, Ainen Kurose realized she wasn't in the USJ at all anymore, but rather in a public park on the edge of Musutafu. Removing the helmet from her head, the woman with monochrome hair and black holes for eyes sighed, before reaching for her phone and dialing the emergency hotline directly to the rat's office. There was no way that the champion of the void would let someone just break into her training ground, her baby, after all. Castle Crags. Screw you. Another minor thug crumpled as Kyoka Gyro slammed her fist into his ribcage, followed immediately by a powerful sonic burst that cracked his ribs and sternum like an egg. Who's next? The girl was almost immediately charged by a thug with 2 axes and a white mask, a man who went by the creative and imaginative epithet of Axa, only to be sidestepped and greeted by a brutal kick to the groin that was followed immediately by another sonic attack. Unimaginable pain shooting through the man as he stumbled away, only to fall off a short cliff nearby when a beanbag round smacked into the disoriented man's head and sent him flying off his feet and over the ledge. Yuriorozu racked her beanbag shotgun and tried not to wince at her classmates' brutality, while Kaminari and Shoji fought more villains back-to-back. Nearby, as the heiress took in her surroundings and looked at the long path towards the exit, she squinted at an odd addition to the landscape. Is that a pickup truck? Battlefield Tokyo. They just keep coming, shouted Mashirao Ojiro, spinning so that his tail would deflect the invisible villain that appeared from the shadows behind him and tried to get the drop on him. The teen muttered an internal apology to the man as his tail caught the chameleon mutant and sent him flying into a wall. In one deft motion, the tailed teen dashed over, picked the man up and flung him into the shadows, but not before sliding a beacon into the man's suit, marking him as another potential member for a recruitment team to pick up for liberation. Skeptics Division would love this guy. I know, right? This may be a life-or-death situation, but it's actually pretty manly. Kirishima responded, a man dropping like a rock under his hardened fist. With the last of the villains on this street dealt with, the two looked up as they heard a noise quickly approaching them. A moment later, Tenya Ida rounded the corner. What's the story, Engine Bro? If Ida was irritated by his new nickname, he did not show it. We have 5 more blocks to fight through, each one with about a dozen villains on it, the bespectacled teen said, removing his helmet. They're not what I'm worried about, however. The biggest villain from the plaza is waiting for us at the exit, and when I approached him he made it clear he'd only let us through if we satisfied him in a fight. I'll do it, Kirishima said, to the shock of his classmates. I just need to keep him occupied and wear him down while you guys deal with the rest of them, right? If anyone here can fight someone like that in an endurance battle, it's me. Ojiro sighed, because he knew his red-headed classmate had a point. I hate to say it, but you're right. Ida, if you can take him there, I'll work to clean up the other streets with hit and run tactics until you get back. The youngest Ida nodded solemnly. He didn't like the idea, but given the odds they were facing, they didn't have much of a choice. The burning world. Die. The last of the minor enemies fell to the ground with a groan, smoking from the explosive punch Bakugou had rocked him with. Nearby, another villain was writing around from the irritating sensation of Ashido's acid on his skin, while Zero was taping together several groups of incapacitated villains. Is that the last of these fuckers? I think so, Zero said, still a little out of breath from all the running they'd done. Good. You and Raccoon Eyes aren't useless, but I want you to get out of the building as soon as we escape this hellscape, Bakugou said, beginning to walk away, only to be cut off when a jet of pressurized water shot past his head, slicing off a little of his hair and knocking over a sign in the background. Now wait just a minute there, kids, a voice called from the direction of the blast. A sudden tide of liquid rushed around the corner from behind a burning house, carrying 4 identically dressed men wearing horned masks and light blue jackets. We were told to keep you occupied, and we're gonna do just that. Oh great, who are these losers? Bakugou grumbled, taking a fighting stance. The leader of the group smirked under his mask. Laugh it up while you can, kid, you'll be just one of many who have regretted underestimating Cider House. Beached. Excuse me, children, might I be of assistance? The voice from behind them startled Tokoyami and Asui, who both attacked in that general direction, only to find nothing but air. I'm sorry, but I simply cannot let you defeat me just yet. That would be going against my directions for this job. You. Tokoyami gasped, looking at the man sitting on thin air above the boat they'd managed to find refuge on. Thou art gentle criminal. So I am, the man said, sipping a cup of Gold Tips Imperial, while looking at both the hero students on the boat and the villains in the water below him. This tea is exquisite. Would any of you care for a cup? An assortment of voices replied to his question. No thank you. I'm good right now. Shouldn't we be fighting those kids? I prefer coffee. Danjuro Tobita sighed. There's no accounting for taste, I suppose, he said, taking another sip. You know him, Kiro? Asui asked. He is blessed by incredible strength and determination, even if his goals and methods are odd at times, Tokoyami said. I am subscribed to his HeroTube channel and have seen his exploits. He hath defeated pro heroes before, even some within the ranks of the top 100. Fun times indeed, Gentle said, addressing the students. I am here to serve as another test for you if you can defeat the men in the water below. What was it that Decay said my role was, again? Oh yes, an area boss fight for you. Until you can defeat my companions. However, I shall not attack you. Good luck to you all. And as Gentle returned to his tea, the 2 students looked grimly at the menacing men in the water below. The day after tomorrow. Whoa. It was only his recent makeup lessons with Eraserhead and a stroke of good luck that allowed Hitoshi Shinsu to just barely dodge the girl who had leapt from a nearby rooftop, slashing at him with a fairly large knife in her hand. Are you crazy? That could have killed me. Himiko Toga laughed for a moment. Well I'm a villain, she said, twirling the knife in her right hand. Nearby, the sounds of fighting grew softer as Rikido Soto and Yuga Aoyama defeated the villains in their way and progressed towards the exit. Studying the other teens' features, the blonde blushed a little. You're kind of cute, you know? Ah, what? The purple-haired teen said. And for that matter, why isn't my Quirk working on you? Oh, that. Toga said. Well, let it not be said that Carmilla the Vampire Queen doesn't prepare. These headphones filter out the effects of your Quirk by recording what you say and playing it back to me, making it safe for me to respond to you. Well, fuck, Shinsu thought, before the vampire continued to taunt him. That means they knew about my Quirk and how to counter it. This attack was well planned. Don't worry, they'll only work for the next 5 minutes, she said. Your Quirk is strong by nature and difficult to filter out the effects of, so these headphones will rapidly burn through their batteries and I'll be vulnerable once that happens. But until then, keep me entertained. The blonde woman lunged, and Shinsu was forced to dodge. This was going to be the hardest fight of his life, he could already tell. Falling rock. You need to leave, Todoroki said, while the rock-skinned teen behind him quivered in fear, despite the spark of determination in his eyes. I can't go all out if I'm at risk of injuring you. In the crossfire. As he said this, another iceberg sprouted from his feet, launching dozens of copies of the same man into the air, each one exploding into brown clay. Despite his reservations, Koda finally opted to do as Todoroki had asked, and the shy teen nodded in compliance. Todoroki threw a massive glacier in the direction of the oncoming wave of attackers and placed his left hand against another wall of the ice dome that was forming around them. A hole melted in it, forming a long tunnel that ended in one of the forested sections of the USJ between the training zones and the plaza. Koda raced away, a group of rats, squirrels, and starlings following him, while Todoroki turned back towards the direction of the attack and launched another huge glacier. Meanwhile, Twice sighed as he realized that the Scion of Endeavor had stopped holding back. "Gentlemen," he called, and his clones halted their mad dash. "Yes, sir." "You rang, boss." "Screw you." "Howdy howdy, Houston." "Banzai." "It's not working right." Jin called out to the army of himself. "We need more firepower." "Roger that," one of the clones called, opening one of the briefcases and quickly assembling the parts therein into a simple and modular rocket launcher. Switching strategies, boys. Sadman's Parade, 1812 Overture. Holding one hand out, the clone produced another clone that was holding the exact same rocket launcher. One by one, more and more clones formed until there were nearly 100 identical men holding rocket launchers. Ready. Aim. Fire. The USJ rattled as 100 rockets slammed into Todoroki's ice wall, and while the structure as a whole stood firm, huge icebergs carved off it from the explosive attacks. The recoil destroyed each of the clones that fired, but another one quickly took over the ground. Command post. "We're reloading." The central plaza. "Why'd my Quirk stop working?" Victor wondered aloud, right before something wrapped around his arm and sent him flying into martial hair. "That's Eraserhead, you idiot." One-eyed Green Dragon shouted. "If he looks directly at you, he can erase your Quirk. Be that as it may, can he erase heteromorphic mutants?" "I don't think so." Steel Bulwark shouted, racing forward with two of his 4 fists extended. Aizawa ducked under the man's swing and punted him in the face, then wrapped the capture scarf around his leg while dodging blows from Muscleman and Stitched Giant. In one deft motion, Eraserhead kicked Muscleman in the face, then swung the capture weapon and sent Steel Bulwark careening into him, Stitched Giant and Minotaurus, knocking the entire group over like oversized bowling pins. "I can make do," the man said simply, before dashing off towards his next prey. Meanwhile, Midoriya stared at his brother as he, Hagakure and Uraraka were surrounded by more villains. Bring it on. Chapter end notes. Author's notes. Well, I'm already doing better than I was before. The USJ has officially begun, and the League is broadcasting the spectacle to the whole wide world with some slight behind the scenes editing from La Brava, of course. Yes, I gave unique names to the different zones in the USJ. Why? Because why the heck not? Stay tuned for the next chapter, coming hopefully soon again. Thanks for reading, as ever. Peace. DVD 181. Chapter notes. Guest lecture. Surprise midweek update, because I'm hyped for y'all to read the end of the USJ. Also, go check out the new one-shot I dropped yesterday, Brothers in Arms. If you like Multiverse Fix, this one will be right up your alley. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Unforeseen Simulation Joint. Chapter 15, Guest Lecture. 8 minutes since the League of Villains attacked. Nobody move a muscle. Tesla warned the students of the castle crags, holding an incapacitated Kaminari by the back of his shirt, the blonde teenager lightly struggling but drooling from the overcharge he'd recently committed to. "Do anything funny and I'll light him up." Shoji and Gyro stood protectively in front of a panting Yororozu, the heiress forced to one knee by the effort of creating a large insulative blanket to cover the three of them so That Kaminari could unleash an area of effect attack. And what assurances do we have that you won't do it anyway? Gyro retorted, one of her earlobes creeping down towards her boots in an effort to surprise attack the villain. My goodwill. You're going to have to trust in me, Tesla snorted. Just like I'd like to trust you. If not for that attack I see you trying to fire off. A few other villains who'd managed to find cover before Kaminari's attack laughed in agreement, now starting to surround the students. This is my fault, Shoji thought. If I'd just heard him coming, I could have protected Kaminari. Gyro growled and stopped extending her earphone jack towards her boot, only to suddenly ram it into her right knuckle duster and fire a pinpoint sonic attack that hit Tesla directly in the face. Oh, the man shouted, temporarily blinded as the vigilante rushed him. However, just because he was blinded didn't mean he was out of the fight, and the man immediately electrocuted the teen in his hand while holding his face with the other. The violent vigilante skidded to a stop, a shout of horror escaping her mouth as the light died. And her classmate seemingly did as well, until Kaminari rubbed his eyes, yawned and then kicked Tesla in the stomach so hard that he dropped like a rock. But oh how? Yoroyorozu asked weakly. The electric blonde grinned. Thanks man, I'm all charged up again now, he said, flashing two-finger guns at his groaning ex-captor. The grin turned from charming to predatory a moment later. In fact, I dare say you've charged me into overdrive. And then he was gone. What dash? Asked Axa as he climbed up the cliff, now recovered from Gyro's previous groin attack, only to take an electric punch to the face and immediately fall back down the cliff. The other villains fell like dominoes right after, each one electrocuted by an unseen punch or a punishing kick. Only when the last one fell did Kaminari reappear, now crackling with electricity and vibrating a little bit. Oh man, I always get jittery when I'm overcharged, the blonde complained, before pointing at Gyro. Keep an eye on Yarumomo, would you? Shoji, let's go beat up those guys at the truck. With that, he turned and started jogging away at a pace that was more like a run for a normal person. Shoji looked to Gyro, who simply shrugged and started carrying Yoroyorozu to a sheltered spot nearby, so he turned and ran to catch up with Kaminari. That was really impressive, Kaminari-kun. You really are strong, he said, finally catching up with the casually jogging teen. Tell me, have you ever heard of meta-liberation? Day after tomorrow. Damn it. Shinsu cursed, dropping to one knee and grabbing his side to staunch the bleeding from the cut there. His opponent was skilled and had been outmatching him for their entire fight, dancing around his eskrima sticks while talking about how much better he'd look if he was blooded. Maybe almost as good as my Prometheus looks, she'd said. What bullshit. The blonde girl smiled. You're not bad, Toshi, but you could use some work. Hopefully you can catch up with your classmates who trained their bodies instead of just their quirks soon. The smile dropped from her face suddenly. Really, she said, talking to someone via her headphones. That's not good, I'll be right there dash. A sigh. Sorry to leave you here, Toshi. But my headphones just died and I'm needed back at the plaza, so I can't talk to you anymore. Can't wait to play with you later. With that, Carmilla dashed up a nearby fire escape to the roof of a fake building and ran out of his sight, clearly headed back to the main part of the building. Wait, Shinsu cried, but of course he got no response except the howling of the wind and pattering of the rain. Why am I so weak? Shinsu, a voice called out. The teen turned to see Amar and Soto headed his way, both of them scraped up but otherwise mostly unharmed. Are you okay? Mostly, he called back, no enthusiasm in his voice. I got cut up fighting that blonde girl from the plaza. Right now I'm not in danger and I just want to go home and cuddle with my cats. Born Ide Amar responded, panting slightly. We managed to drive off the other meshants in this zone, but weren't able to capture them. Shinsu didn't know this, but Amar was lying. A few minutes earlier. Stay down, Soto roared, popping a sugar cube in his mouth and punching a larger crocodile mutant into a nearby wall, then jumping on him and raining punches on the man. Nearby, several other villains were forced to bob and weave to avoid AMR's lasers, which were being refracted in interesting ways by the falling rain. Wait, one of them shouted, running towards Soto. Addiction, is that you? It's me. Jackknife from Orientation. Soto stopped punching the crocodile man and stood up. Jackknife. But then, equalizers are here. Some of us, the man said, sighing. We got called in on a job that turned out to be way bigger than expected. You okay, man? Just bruised, the saccharine Superman said, sitting down. If we are revealing secrets here, I work for the League and am Prometheus and Decay's cousin by technicality, AMR said, to the surprise of the other villains. Can we stop fighting? What do we do now? Another villain asked. Jackknife sighed. Might as well call for extraction. Let's get out of here. You kids go on. Back to class. Shinsu was none the wiser about the villainous affiliations of his classmates as they carried him out of the wind and rain-blasted dome on Soto's back, exiting through a side door into one of the forested medians between zones. Falling rock. He's too strong. Baloney. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead dash. If I don't make it out, tell my wife and kids I love them. What wife and kids? Keep firing, assholes. I'm firin' my rocket. He dash. This isn't going well, Jin said, watching the ice encroach on their position in a slow but inevitable crawl. Soon he's going to overwhelm us back here dash. A voice crackled over his earpiece. Abort your current mission. Twice, you're needed back at the main plaza to keep Eraser occupied. Twice sighed. I figured that would be the case, he said, before turning to face what remained of his army. Ms. Today, we did our best, but we haven't lost yet. How about one last heroic sacrifice just to be cliché? The returning sound of cheers from hundreds of copies of himself warmed his heart. Show him what you've got. Make the scion of endeavor fear the sad man's parade. I'm sorry, everyone. Twice thought to himself as he turned and ran, a briefcase in each hand. Behind him, the war cries of hundreds of the same man were punctuated by the rumbling of nature's fury and dozens of huge explosions, the cacophony bouncing off the walls of the USJ. Battlefield Tokyo. You're great, kid. Rapper laughed, another barrage of punches knocking the kid with stone skin back but not out of the fight. Keep it up. Kirishima, for his part, was doing everything he could just to stay in the fight. The so-called rapper was a tough customer, with his punches breaking his stony skin even with regular boxing gloves. The man had discarded his metal gauntlets on the ground nearby at the start of the fight just to even the odds between them, which the redhead wasn't sure whether to find demeaning or manly. I'm not gonna fall. Not yet, when so much is at stake. Good. Rapper roared, his huge fists making contact with Kirishima's skin once more. Maybe you'll have what it takes to entertain me for real soon. One of his punches made contact with Kirishima's chin, the boy's head snapping backwards but his body refusing to yield. If this is my limit, then maybe I shouldn't be a hero, but I can't give up, the teen thought, feeling a new sort of energy race out of his core. I've got to be stronger. For Mina's sake. For Ojiro and Ida's sake. For the sake of my friends and my family. To show that I'm a man, damn it. As another punch landed, Rapper was surprised when it bounced off, as the teenager's entire body seemed to become hardened once over again. Interesting, a new move. Kirishima's mouth creaked as he forced his jaws to open. I feel like I've hardened again. While already hardened, I feel like I might be unbreakable. But I can't move, he groaned. It's a start, kid, and that's something most people never manage, Rapper laughed, spotting Ojiro and Ida as they ran around a corner. His eyes narrowed before he threw a single punch, with much more force behind it, that launched the stationary redhead off his feet and into his friends, bowling them over. That's enough of that. Pointing his finger at the now unhardened teen, the rapper issued his challenge. Kid. What's your name? Iehiro Kirishima, the teen groaned. Kirishima. From now on, you are my rival. Rapper roared, laughing with glee. Get stronger. Face me. Match me. And someday, you may even defeat me. You alone are worthy of that honor. With that, the man turned and dashed away while the 3 UA students were still picking themselves up. Main Plaza, USJ. Delaware, smash. Midoriya's yell cut through the air as he channeled around 15% of one for all into his finger. And fired, shooting an air bullet at Decay. His brother's amusement was palpable as he dodged around the attack with blazing speed, rushing at him only to be interrupted by a flying kick attack from Uraraka. This forced Tenko to retreat again, causing him to jump back and place his hand on the floor, decaying a shallow trench in the ground in front of him, and kicking up a cloud of dust. Where'd he go? Midoriya shouted as the dust settled to reveal his brother was gone. A sudden ringing in his head from danger sense alerted him to the attack right before 2 hands burst out of the ground below him and swiped at his legs, forcing him to dodge as Tenko leapt out of the hole he'd dug with Decay and attempted to grab his face. Going for lethal attacks already? Are you serious? This time Uraraka was ready, swiping at Decay with her own 5-finger attack. Only one of her fingers managed to touch him, however, swiping the bracer on his right arm. A good try, Heroling, but not good enough, he said, before pointing behind them. Looks like your teacher is in trouble. The 2 of them briefly glanced back to see that Aizawa was now being forced to fight Toga twice and Rapper at the same time with Kurogiri supporting them, while Hagakure blended in and watched from the sidelines. This seemingly was a taunt, but for the 2 hero trainees, it was a totally different message. They had to abandon fighting the students. We're going to have to hurry up. You're right, and that's why we have to stop you here. Midoriya shouted, driving his fingers into the ground and lifting Fairbanks smash. Tenko gritted his teeth behind his mask and decayed fingerholds for himself into the section that Midoriya had thrown into the air. As it reached the zenith of its arc, about 15 meters up or so, the young adult let go and jumped to a nearby tree, decaying it to return to the ground in a controlled descent while the section of floor landed nearby, shattering into a million pieces. That was some One Punch Man bullshit, kid. Are you using ganks or something? He asked, flexing his fingers. Maybe not, Midoriya answered, panting slightly from the effort. It doesn't matter either way. You can't defeat me, Decay snapped. I know, Midoriya laughed, before his expression took on a sharp edge to warn his brother of incoming danger. But there's someone else who can. As if right on cue, the doors to the USJ exploded off their hinges as the symbol of peace entered the facility. Tenko's eyes widened, while several of the mooks Hagakure and Aizawa had beaten earlier started to get back up. Kurogiri, warp in the Peacebreaker, now. Shirakumo reacted in an instant, opening a portal next to Decay as All Might blurred out of existence, turning into an unseen force that blew the villains that had just gotten up off their feet. A giant mass of dark flesh surged out of the portal, meeting him head-on and creating a shockwave that blew everyone around them away, forcing hero and villain alike to retreat a safe distance. I saw the livestream on the news and knew I had to come immediately, but this man was not with you, villain. All Might grunted, shoving shoulder first against his opponent. The beast in question was even taller and more muscular than the symbol of peace, with midnight blue skin and a bird-like bead coupled with an exposed brain and deep red surgical scars. It wore nothing but a pair of brown cargo pants with knee pads shaped like skulls. We had this guy waiting in the wings just in case you showed up, All Might Decay laughed. You're not supposed to be here, that's why we prepared so many lovely distractions for you this morning. But since you're here, you can fight this Nomu, or as Sensei liked to call it before you killed him, the Peacebreaker. The beast forced All Might back, giving them both a chance to catch their breath. That crime wave this morning was all you, he roared. Of course. Tenko laughed. We're trying to make a simple debut as educators today, not pick a fight with the symbol of peace. Yet you came anyway, which means now you have to fight Peacebreaker. The albino's eyes narrowed behind his mask. Sensei was hoping to surprise you with this one. He and the good doctor made it just for you, all its quirks picked out just to fight you. Quirks! All Might shouted, rushing the Nomu again and grabbing it in a headlock. Then your sensei was. Decay grinned behind his mask. The only villain you ever killed on purpose, All Might. With a cry of anger, the blonde giant began to trade blows with the Nomu faster and faster, until the two fighters had become a blur of fists and fury. The fight grew harder to follow, while the wind from their hits colliding forced the other heroes and villains back further. They're moving so fast. Uraraka cried from next to Midoriya, while the greenette stared in shock. This is the power I wield now. Not like that, yet his uncle's voice chided him from within. But someday you'll be even stronger than that. So, All for One created you to fight me, huh? All Might shouted, his arms blurring. Faster and faster. In that case dash. The man stopped and jumped back when a trail of frost crept across the ground, freezing the Nomu's legs solid and creeping up its body to include its right arm. Todoroki stared passively at the scene before him, then looked at All Might despite the chattering of his teeth. Try hitting it now, he said simply. The symbol of peace grinned, then leapt forward and drove a mighty fist directly into the beast's chest. Plus Ultra, Detroit Smash. For a moment, the air in the USJ seemed to grow heavy, then warp and change before an unrivaled force exploded into existence inside the dome. With its feet iced in place, the Nomu was helpless to resist and was promptly launched into the side of the dome, smashing a hole through it and sending it flying off far into the distance. Whoa, someone in the crowd of gathering hero students muttered. It seems like I've gotten weaker after all. Thank you for the assistance, young Todoroki, All Might said. The bichromatic teen was taken aback at the way All Might addressed him, but said nothing as the blonde giant turned to face the remaining members of the league. I do not recommend resisting further. Kurogiri, we're retreating now, Decay shouted, leaping back and placing both hands on the floor. The cloud of dust that erupted choked the plaza, while dozens of twice clones leapt to attack the heroes and students. Enough, roared All Might, clapping his hands together in a Virginia smash and clearing the cloud of dust from around them, the force of the shockwave popping all the twice clones near him due to their fluid physiology. The symbol of peace fought down the urge to curse when he saw that the other villains had escaped, but turned to look at the students. Are you all okay? This is my fault, Yagi said with a defeated sigh to Aizawa as they watched medical staff care for the students. I shouldn't have wasted my time this morning. I should have been there. And what would you have done? Aizawa asked, leveling a tired expression at him. You've been teaching these students as Toshinori Yagi, not All Might. How would you have managed the logistics of not blowing your secret wide open to the entire class if you'd been there when this happened? I don't know, Yagi admitted. Maybe I shouldn't be keeping a secret like this from them. And maybe I should start giving opportunities to other heroes. For once, Aizawa actually looked stunned. You can't possibly be suggesting . Yagi nodded. I think I want to tell them, and I need to announce my retirement as All Might. I'm getting weaker every day, and I need to be there for these kids if they're being targeted by his remaining followers. Aizawa quirked an eyebrow, and Yagi sighed. I'll talk about this at the next hero faculty meeting. It'll be better to tell you all at the same time. Final results of the USJ attack. 110 F-rank villains captured. 75 E-rank villains captured. 61 D-rank villains captured. 1 A-rank villain captured. League of Villains leadership escaped. 8 UA high students injured. 1 case of near hypothermia, Shoto Todoroki. 2 minor concussions, Tsuyu Asui and Ahiro Kirishima. 1 case of moderate quirk exhaustion, Momo Yoroirozu. 2 cases of minor burns, Hanta Siro and Mina Ashido. 1 case of blood loss and lacerations, Hitoshi Shinsu. 1 case of severe bruising, Ahiro Kirishima. 1 broken arm, Mashirao Ojiro. 1 yellow pinstripe blazer destroyed, All Might. 1,224 twice clones destroyed. Oboro's Back Alley Tavern, Yokohama. Cheers. The inside of the normally quiet bar was raucous with noise, as the League of Villains raised a toast to their debut operation in the public eye. The entire group was all together for once. Rapper was at the bar instead of prowling the underground fighting circuit, and there were some guests there too. Uraraka, Hakagyu and the gentle duo had both been invited for their help in the raid, while the Reservoir Dogs had engaged in a drinking competition with cider house in the background. Kurogiri had dropped his normal disguise, revealing his true, unnaturally youthful self to the rest of the group as he furnished drink after drink to them. "If I could get everyone's attention, please?" Izuku called, amplifying his voice slightly with a vocal quirk. As the group quieted down, he began to address them. "Today was our official debut as a major villain group in Japan, and it certainly won't be our only stunt. I take it everyone else knows their roles in our remaining operations." Another cheer came from the crowd as the Greenette made reference to the other schools they were targeting across the country. Shiketsu, Ketsubutsu, Sei, Izumu and Saijin were all targets that would be hit at random over the next week, sowing discord in the hero ranks and reminding students to shape up lest they have a surprise lesson visited upon them. Good. Sadly, I won't be available to help you, and neither will my classmates, but I've learned that I won't be disappointed if I expect the best out of you, Izuku said. Go out there and give 'em hell tomorrow, but tonight? Tonight, we party. Another chorus of cheers greeted this declaration as the Greenette threw back what remained of his ginger ale. The next morning, the national media was completely abuzz with discussion over the attack. No other news was aired that morning, as the media executives knew the best ratings were going to come from talking further about the villain group that made their debut with the audacious move of attacking UA High School, arguably the greatest fortress on the Japanese archipelago short of the National Diet and Paragon Plaza. In the aftermath of the incident, Eraserhead received a massive popularity boost, much to Aizawa's own chagrin, and many of the 1A students were lauded on social media for their efforts. However, this was public media, and Midoriya had forgotten that the news wouldn't just be watched by heroes and everyday citizens, and his machinations would hardly go unnoticed by the established powers of the underworld. Deika Central Tower, Aichi Prefecture. "And that's their entire livestream," said the blue-skinned woman standing on one end of a room near the top of the tower, gesturing to the large television screen next to her. This League of Villains was intending to make a splash with their debut, and they clearly succeeded given the kind of focus they're getting in the news right now. "Thank you," Curious said the long-nosed man sitting at the opposite end of the table from where she was presenting. "First advisors, what are your opinions on this group?" A dark-haired man with well-groomed facial hair and glasses coughed lightly. "I would normally have jumped on this attack for the political implications and opportunities it allows. But the leader of the minority coalition already did just that," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I hadn't even heard of Hisashi Akatani a year ago, but the fact that his future outright party is using this to advocate for reforming the hero system, arguing that we shouldn't be so far off in the weeds that the villains have to tell us what the most obvious solution is, speaks volumes about his gamesmanship. Speaking of Akatani, this only raises my curiosity about him. What does he really believe in, and might he be a potential ally of liberation? Either way, I need more information," said another man at the table, his long hair covering much of his hair and meshing well with his black turtleneck. "I have no strong opinions on the League, though they are correct about the dogs of the state," said the final figure, a man in a parka whose face was entirely shadowed by the hood of his outfit. "However, their attack did bring in some new recruits. I am particularly proud of the one that Hydra recruited. He is an energetic young man with a powerful electric meta ability." "Very good," the first man said from the head of the round table. "I believe the League warrants further monitoring, but not direct intervention. If they eventually pose a threat to liberation, we will destroy them. If they are potential allies for liberation, we will extend an olive branch to them. Until then, I adjourn this meeting of the Meta Liberation Army's High Command." As his trusted lieutenants left the room, Rikiya Yotsubashi, the CEO of Detnerat in public, and Redestro, Grand Commander of the Meta Liberation Army in private, allowed himself to relax. Looking at the news report on the screen, a small smile ghosted across his face. "Prometheus, huh? I truly wonder how far you will go." Paragon Plaza, Tokyo. The headquarters of Japan's Hero Public Safety Commission was a veritable fortress in the heart of the nation's capital, located just a short distance from both Might Tower and nearly adjacent to the National Diet. It was a silent display of power and influence from a group that some considered the true power behind the throne in modern Japan, a theory that, if they were ever unfortunate enough to learn was true, they could be forced to pay with their lives. Most of the heroes being turned out on the streets these days suck at their jobs, another generation that seems to have bought so much into the style of heroism that they forgot all the substance. "You make me sick." These words rang out through the speakers in an office at the top of Paragon Plaza, over and over again. Finally, another voice spoke. "Surely you understand this kind of criticism of the hero system is unacceptable," Mera said. A middle-aged woman with dark hair and eyes the color of blood as she turned to an exhausted-looking man, while two exceedingly tall figures in white uniforms, a man and a woman, respectively, stood on either side of her. "I want you to declare Prometheus and Decay both S-rank villains, find this league, get an infiltrator in by any means necessary, and bring me Prometheus's head on a platter. Am I clear?" "Crystal," the tired man saluted. "Good. You are dismissed," she said, and Yokimaru Mera, the director of operations for the HPSC, allowed himself to step outside of the office and finally relax, slouching as the fear she'd instilled in him finally started to leave his body. Meanwhile, the woman herself took a seat, looking out across the city below. "Sundowner, Mistral, you may both also leave me." The guards both saluted and left, leaving the woman alone in her office. How dare they? Yuki Kagazaki, the president of the HPSC, was known for her reputation as a terrifying figure who ruled the organization with both honeyed words and an iron fist. She was less known for her almost fanatical defense of the modern hero system. The audacity of these scum to imply there is anything wrong with how we do things will not go unpunished. After her momentary outburst, the woman touched her own cheek and activated her quirk. Persuasion was a weak power in a fight, but when it came to manipulating those around her, it was downright terrifying. Compartmentalizing her fury with her powers, the woman smiled. She hadn't backstabbed her way up the ranks for nothing over the years and certainly hadn't engineered the Nagant incident for no reason. No, she was the most powerful woman in Japan for good reason, and if she had her way, she'd be the most powerful person in East Asia by the end of the decade, and no two-bit villain trash was going to derail that destiny from her. A modest apartment in Yokohama. "Now that's what I'm talking about," laughed a man in his mid-30s with short, red-brown hair, wearing a pair of silk pajamas. Atsuhiro Sako was very proud of his protégés, Ghost and Inversion, for their remarkable acting on the hero side of the previous day's conflict. "Toru, Okako, you two might even surpass my ancestor someday if you keep stealing the show like this," as he pulled out a burner phone to send a coded message informing the peerless legacy of their next move. The man's smile refused to wane. "And Tenko? Izuku?" Good job on pulling this off. You stole the attention of the entire world for the rest of this week. That's not something just anyone can say they've done. Somewhere in Hokkaido, our leader is a unique fellow. He loves heroes, believe it or not, which is really annoying sometimes, and wants to see them succeed and protect the people of Japan. An earthen fist smashed the cell phone, playing the offending soundbite into 1,000 pieces. Unacceptable, shouted a middle-aged woman with short-cropped dirty blonde hair and dark brown eyes, while the fist retreated back into the light brown kimono with white patterns like flowing sand on it. This new group does not desire to purge the heretics against nature, but rather to further the human disease. Calm thyself, my dearest Gaia, the man next to her said, a curious expression in his emerald eyes, while the close-cropped hairline of grass and leaves atop his head seemed to sway in a non-existent breeze. He reached an arm out, embracing the woman softly while the rocks around them glowed with a soft orange fluorescence. His dark green kimono was printed with a lighter green pattern resembling pine branches and needles. We will purge all the heretics eventually. Another group attempting to further their cause will not impede us. The woman's breathing calmed and he slowly let her go. However, as long as our daughter and the infiltrator are at that school, they risk being polluted by that group's ideals, especially if they attack again. I think it may be time that we pull our agent and our chosen one from under the rat's supervision, he said, his eyes flashing a bright green for a moment. You are right, my sweet, strong Sitka. Nature's revolt is inevitable. After all, that is why our Ecological Restoration Alliance exists, the woman said, smiling softly. Karelia City, Kagoshima Prefecture. Creating better heroes. A laugh resounded through the almost perfectly clean white room, as a lone man stood in the middle of it. In every way, he was almost painfully average. Average height, average weight, plain black hair and brown eyes. The only thing extraordinary about him was his quirk, or more accurately lack thereof, but scarcely a century earlier, that would have made him even more average. Better heroes are the last thing I need, the man continued, as he walked over to a computer terminal near the edge of the plain white room. After all, better heroes mean less discrimination in society, and that's bad for a man like me who's in the business of strife and discontent. Raymond Tadeno, the CEO of lifestyle products company Base Corporation and secretly King, the leader of the villain army known as the Equalizers, opened his computer terminal to the video footage of All Might defeating the Nomu and began to take notes. Someday, all these fools will be forced to acknowledge what Kazu-san said all those years ago. Eventually, technology will render even quirks obsolete if we have the materials to research, develop and build. His eyes narrowed in on decay as he continued to monologue in the footage. And for me, the downtrodden in society, those with weak quirks, villain quirks, mutant quirks, or none at all, those are the raw materials that I need. Looking at a framed image of several men in white business suits with silver briefcases, he chuckled. I wouldn't be a good merchant of death if I just let my raw materials be taken, now would I? A warehouse near the edge of Hosu City. Yo, Stabby, called out a dark-haired man covered in burns and piercings as he carefully fried a skillet of rice, vegetables, and meat over an old coffee can full of burning wood. You see the video of that new group that attacked UA yesterday? Don't call our mentor Stabby, Darby. The scarred man rolled his eyes as his reptilian companion shouted at him from the other room, where he was no doubt sharpening the abomination he called a sword. Whatever, Spinner, he shouted back. I have indeed seen that footage, said a third voice, deep and slightly raspy, as a towering Goliath of a man entered from a third room in the old office they were camped out in. The hero killer, Stain, was a figure that still sent chills down Darby's back even after the man took Lizard Brain and himself in as disciples. I admit I am intrigued by what they said, but they do not change our crusade in the slightest. Sitting down on the ratty couch in the middle of the room, Stain pulled his phone out and reviewed the footage, a grin slowly forming on his face as their figurehead, Decay, spoke. In a way that aligned with much of Stain's outlook on heroism, though his face fell slightly. When the man mentioned Endeavor as an example of an uncommonly competent hero willing to put in hard work to overcome adversity. Their stances are interesting and they're certainly a wild card in the underworld of Japan. Now. Still, if they get in my way, they will be judged. Deep within Jaku General Hospital. How fascinating, exclaimed an overweight, elderly man with a bushy mustache despite his total lack of hair. The man was watching footage of another attack currently ongoing, this one on an off-campus training exercise at Seigen Academy. It seems a new player has captured some of Lord's old assets. I see the teleporting Nomu, the Peacebreaker, and the Shimura brat at the very least, and has managed to turn them into a somewhat competent fighting force. Turning to look around the glowing lab tubes with inhuman figures suspended in them, Dr. Kudai-Garaki's grin widened in a predatory manner. However, I do not take kindly to my assets or lords being stolen and repurposed for something that resembles nothing more than glorified vigilantism or perhaps even an elaborate psyop by the Commission. I wonder how they'll react if they have to face some of my more complete creations, or maybe even my newest patient. Zooming in on the footage from UA, the man raised an eyebrow. That boy fighting there. Leader looks a lot like Lord's child. Yet I know Izuku Midoriya had no quirk, this has one. For all's fingerprints all over it. At the back of the lab, inside an unusually large tube, a figure floated in liquid suspension, silhouetted by the dull glow of the machines behind them. However, the figure still dreamed. Despite it all, golden eyes closed in their slumber. Kill, League, Prometheus. Chapter End Notes. Author's Notes. The USJ is now over, and so is the first phase of Midoriya's plot. However, this bold move has gotten him major attention throughout Japan, and much of it is anything but positive. The sports festival is about to be all that's on his mind, but he needs to think further about the consequences of such a big move. Now I've officially introduced some of the other villains that are prowling Japan's underworld. In order. Rikiya Redestro Yotsubashi, CEO of Detnerat and Grand Commander of the Meta Liberation Army. He is seemingly just curious about the League and how their future plans may affect the dream of liberation. Yuki Kagazaki, the queen bitch of the HPSC and puppet master behind much of what happens in Japanese heroism and politics. Atsuhiro Mr. Compress Sako, descendant of OG Peerless Thief Harima and leader of the Phantom Thief band Peerless Legacy. Hanako Gaia Suikai and Kagamatsu Sitka Mori, the co-leaders of the eco-terrorist doomsday cult known as the Ecological Restoration Alliance. Raymond King Tadano, the quirkless scientist who leads Base Corporation as its CEO. And the Equalizers as their Lord General. Chisome Stain Akaguro, former vigilante turned nomadic hero killer. And finally, Kudai-Garaki, renowned early quirk physician, chairman of the board of Jaku General Hospital, a moral biotechnologist, and former right-hand of All for One. I was also asked to put a list of 1A's members and their allegiances in the author's notes, so the class is as follows: Yuga Aiyama, League of Villains, Mina Ashido, Hero Student, Tsuyu Asui, Hero Student, Tenya Ida, Hero Student, Okako Uraraka, Peerless Legacy, Mashirao Ojiro, Meta Liberation Army, Denki Kaminari, Meta Liberation Army, New Recruit, A Hero Kirishima, Hero Student, Koji Koda, Hero Student, Rikido Soto, Equalizers, Mizo Shoji, Meta Liberation Army, Kyoka Gyro, Vigilantes Anonymous, Hanta Zero, Hero Student, Fumikage Tokoyami, Hero Student, Shoto Todoroki, Hero Student, Toru Hagekure, Peerless Legacy, Katsuki Bakugou, Hero Student, Izuku Midoriya, League of Villains, Hitoshi Shinsu, Hero Student, Momo Yorozu, Hero Student. In the next chapter, we begin the sprint to the UA High Sports Festival, and all the tournament arc fun that entails. I look forward to seeing you all there. Peace. DVD 181. Chapter Notes. Starting line. See the end of the chapter for notes. 2 days after the USJ was attacked by the League of Villains. You're on in 30 seconds, Mr. All Might, sir. Toshinori Yagi sighed as the voice of his publicist crackled through his earpiece, ignoring the phantom pain in his left side as best he could while one for all Sembers coursed through him and buffed him up into his muscle form once more. Time to face the music, he thought. Stepping through a curtain and into the room full of reporters and cameras. Good morning, everyone. Stepping up to the podium, the giant of a man tapped the microphone a few times and coughed lightly. Japan, it has been a true honor serving and protecting this lovely nation for the past 32 years, he said, a note of joy in his voice. However, after Thursday's incident, I can no longer deny the truth. My age is catching up with me. The media went very quiet at that declaration, but Yagi continued. My strength most certainly isn't what it used to be, and that nearly cost several innocent lives, all because I'm not quick enough and powerful enough to be everywhere at once. For a brief moment, the man's smile dropped as he bit the inside of his lip. And that is why, in 6 months, I will be officially retiring from active duty as a pro-hero. Immediately, shouts of surprise and some outrage filled the room, but the symbol of peace put a stop to that with a light cough enhanced with a little bit of one for all's power. Please, I am not finished just yet, he said. Despite my impending absence, things are going to be okay. Why? Because I'm not alone as a hero, and despite what the popularity polls would have you believe, I never have been. All Might's voice took on a hopeful tone as he concluded his speech. Endeavor. Best. Genist. Hawks. Ryukyu. All of them are every bit as strong, devoted, and capable as I am, and so are all the other heroes they serve alongside. Yagi said, raising his voice slightly as his speech reached a crescendo. They are here. They will all more than live up to the legacy I hope to leave, and after them, the hero students of tomorrow. Children like the brave souls of Class 1A will reach new heights in service of the public. So fear not, citizens, it's all going to be okay. The symbol of peace stepped away from the podium and retreated behind the curtain as his publicist took the stage to address the media's sharp-edged comments, releasing his muscle form as soon as he was behind the curtain and stumbling into a side room. I'm too weak. After all, Toshinori Yagi said, slumping into a chair and attempting to ignore the ache from his wound. Across Japan, the news of All Might's upcoming retirement shook society to its core. Villains were stunned and emboldened by his admission of weakness, while civilians went to sleep with one eye open out of anxiety, and heroes stepped up to take on their new workload with shock and sadness. The question of just how large the greater implications of this decision would be, however, was far beyond what anyone could have foreseen at the time. A house in Saitama Prefecture. God damn it, Toshinori sighed, a tiny elderly man, turning off the TV and scarfing down the last of his taiyaki. Honestly, you should have done this years ago. Glad to see you have at least some sense in that empty noggin of yours, even if it's coming in a little on the late side. Depositing his clean plate in the kitchen sink to be washed later, Sarahiko Torino, formerly the retired pro-hero and UA High teacher Gran Torino, cleared a space on his living room carpet and began to do some quick stretches. My bones may be old, but I'm still limber enough to give a one for all user what for. Maybe I should give Nezu a call and find out just what Toshi's not telling me. Paragon Plaza, Tokyo. A television screen clicked off in the office of the president, as the leader of the HPSC turned to her unfortunate deputy, Yokimaru Mera. The symbol of peace has decided to retire after Thursday's fiasco, said President Kagazaki, gesturing to the frozen visage of Toshinori Yagi. Summon Hawks and Thunderbolt at once. Endeavor is too much of a loose cannon to be under our thumb the way they are, and at a time like this, we are going to need absolute loyalty. Yes, Mera responded, exiting the room and passing by the Queen Bitch's two imposing bodyguards. As for Kagazaki herself, the woman turned to look out over the cityscape below as a drizzle of rain fell from the sky, reflecting the mood of the Japanese nation. The blonde liability's departure is the opportunity we've waited years for. The time has come to show Japan what heroism really is, and improve our control over this diseased nation. Todoroki residence, Musutafu. Is father going to be okay? Fuyumi Todoroki wondered aloud, standing at the end of the hallway outside the Flame Heroes dojo. The sound of crashing could be heard periodically from inside the heat-proofed room, loud enough to cover up the sound of her vocalized question. Natsuo scoffed from his position next to her. Hell if I know. For that matter, like hell do I care, he said, turning around to return to the kitchen for a mid-morning snack before leaving for his university classes. Shoto, in contrast to his siblings, was simply lost in thought as he stared at the door to the room that had haunted his childhood. I don't get it, he's gotten what he asked for. With all might out of the way, his spot as number one is guaranteed. Why is he upset? Meanwhile, inside the dojo, Enji Todoroki panted from exertion, every training dummy in the room obliterated or set ablaze around him as he lay spread-eagled on the floor of the dojo, staring at the ceiling. Was it all for naught after all? He murmured, his vision blurring slightly from overusing his fire in training. My marriage, Tuia's sacrifice, Shoto's hatred, all undone with his retirement. The number 2 hero clenched his fist. I won't let it be in vain. A warehouse outside Hosu City. Where did Darby go? Questioned the hero killer formerly known as Stain, striding into the former office that he and his disciples were occupying as a temporary base of operations. I think the news made him mad. He said he was going to go set something on fire again. Spinner responded, tightening the leather straps that held together that thing he called a sword. Expect the media to report on a few more melted dumpsters tomorrow morning. As he sat on the ratty couch in the middle of their base, Stain pondered what he'd seen earlier that day. While All Might's retirement disheartened the hero killer, he couldn't deny that he was indeed curious what results would come from the symbol of peace's speech, especially when he called out other so-called heroes to step up and fill his shoes. Will the fakes shape up and step up like he asked them to, or will they still need to be judged? Chizome Akaguro wondered, drawing one of his knives and pondering his reflection in it. And speaking of judgment, I need more information about the League. They forced his hand on this, perhaps they will need culling after all. A bar in Kamino Ward, Yokohama. What? This reaction of disbelief was the only response that came to mind for Izuku Midoriya as he watched his mentor and inspiration announce his retirement from active hero duty for all the world to see. Worse for the young man in question, the reason for his idol's retirement was technically his fault, a realization Izuku numbly reached as a pit of guilt began to form in his subconscious. No, this wasn't supposed to happen, he said, standing up and flinging his empty glass of soda to one side. Oboro sighed and opened a portal, safely catching the glass and allowing him to deposit it in the sink. We needed to make more distractions for him, needed to hire more thugs for him to beat up on the way to UA. If I'd just forced him to use his time limit up, then maybe this could have been avoided. From over near the television, Himiko and Twice stared with worry at the young man as he muttered to himself at the bar. Is this what the 5 stages of grief look like in real time? Twice asked. Wait, no, this is actually a good thing, Izuku suddenly exclaimed, a manic look slowly overtaking his features. All Might's retirement means he gets more time to be himself, more time to teach and more time to not have to carry society on his shoulders. And for that matter, he asked other heroes to step up and grab the slack he's leaving behind. That works towards the League's big goal, right? Yeah. Himiko sighed. Yeah, he just speedran all 5 stages in under a minute. Tenko would be proud, she said, walking over to the bar and placing a comforting hand on her boss's shoulder. Izuku, breathe. I Thank you, Miko-chan, the greenette said, deflating slightly under her touch. I'm worried. Worried that I may have inadvertently derailed the entire plan because I got carried away on a grandiose debut. If that's true, then we'll face that derailment together, Izuku Himiko responded, rubbing her boss's shoulder comfortingly. You're not in this alone, and I want you to remember that, please. I think I can do that, Izuku responded, the edge of anxiety leading his voice. As his subordinate and friend continued to soothingly massage his shoulder muscles, the greenette felt himself nodding off the adrenaline high he'd ridden for the past week, planning and executing their debut, now worn off completely and sending him into a deep, much-needed slumber. Izuku Midoriya hadn't been surprised when his homeroom teacher announced that UACE annual sports festival, the highlight of Golden Week nationally, was only 2 weeks away in their first class after the USJ. He also hadn't been surprised when All Might called him into the teacher's lounge to inform him that Yagi's own time limit had decreased and that he needed to use the sports festival to say "I am here." Though Yagi wouldn't truly have any idea why Midoriya looked so guilty upon learning that news. What he wasn't expecting, however, was being randomly confronted by Todoroki in the locker room the morning of the festival itself. "Can I help you?" After a long and uncomfortable silence, the bi-collared teen finally spoke. "Objectively, you and I are the strongest in this class," he said, ignoring Bakugou's immediate outburst in the background over the implication that he was weaker than Midoriya. "However, your power bears an incredible resemblance to All Might's. And that is why, today, I will beat you in this tournament, and prove that I'm stronger than you." "That's reasonable," Midoriya said, a slightly confused expression on his face. "Seriously? What even is this all about?" "I am relieved you think so," Todoroki responded, turning to walk away. "Just remember, this is a declaration of war, from me to you." With that, the bichromatic teen left the locker room, leaving the rest of his male classmates staring after him. Finally, Kaminari broke the silence. "What the hell was that all about?" Midoriya simply shrugged his shoulders. "I know about as much as you do right now, my electrifying friend," he sighed, making his way to the exit himself. A matter of minutes later. "Good morning, all you sports fans everywhere," the voice of Hisashi Yamada boomed through the massive speaker system, echoing to televisions and radios around the world. "It's me, your host, the present MIC, and we're just moments away from the first-year participants introducing themselves to the world." "MIC, must you be so loud?" another voice groaned. "Oh, I almost forgot. Today I'm joined by another teacher here at UA High, Eraserhead. Give him a big round of applause." Aizawa turned off his microphone and sighed in exasperation as the stadium roared in approval, recognizing him as the teacher who had valiantly fought to protect his students at the USJ 2 weeks earlier. That exasperation only grew when his longtime friend shot him a cheeky, knowing grin, then turned the microphones back on. "And here they come now," he shouted, gesturing to the field below. First out of the gate, they survived a villain attack during their first week of school, and don't show any signs of slowing down. "It's Class 1A. Don't you think this is a little much?" Hagakure wondered aloud as the students of 1A basked in the spotlight, the crowd cheering so loud that Gyro was forced to cover her ears. Though he didn't say anything, Koda nodded in agreement, clearly not a huge fan of the extra attention. "Revelry in the dark," Tokoyami muttered to himself. "But let's not overlook their peers. Class 1B's fangs are sharpened and ready to shine. Don't underestimate them." MIC continued. Midoriya found his eyes drawn over to the group of students that had emerged right behind them and observed some students he found interesting. Of particular note were the blonde thief that Uraraka had introduced him to, a girl with vines for hair in silent prayer, an ash-blonde teen without lips, and a red-headed girl who exuded an aura of quiet authority, despite her relaxed body language. For that matter, UA High doesn't just specialize in heroics here. Come general education classes 1C, 1D, and 1E. Some of them might be aiming to dethrone the hero courses, while others are seeking inspiration or even just a good time. Despite their comparatively lackluster introduction, the 300 students of the General Education Department didn't entirely seem to mind. Midoriya's eyes narrowed as he singled out one from the crowd, who seemed to have a totally different aura to him, a comparatively short teenager with odd purple hair, who was doing a set of push-ups while the introductions were going on. He's taking this a lot more seriously than most of his class. I think he may be worth keeping an eye on. Then we have the Science and Tech Wizards of Tomorrow. Support classes 1F, 1G, and 1H. This group mostly looked bored, aside from the group from 1H, most of whom were adorned in support gear of their own creation. This seemed logical to the Greenette as he realized they were the only class specializing in hero support, while the others had less hero-focused specializations such as chemistry and biology. Most notably decked out in support gear was a pink-haired girl wearing a pair of massive goggles, thick metal boots, and what looked to be a jetpack on her back. She's the one to watch out for from support. And last, but certainly not least, the business courses classes 1I, 1J and 1K. Show them some love, everyone. The entire business course looked actually pretty bored by the prospect of participating. Midoriya could understand why, however, they'd rather be in the stands watching the hero and support courses for potential marketing or investment opportunities instead of taking part half-heartedly in the sports festival. Eraserhead spoke up this time, taking over from MIC. Please welcome this year's referee, Midnight, to the field. His unenthusiastic tone was contrasted by the joyful look on Nemurai Kiyoma's face as she stepped out onto the field, waving to the crowd as she took center stage. Good morning, students. Are you all ready to rumble? The crowd of students cheered loudly, a noise loud enough that Midoriya was able to notice some of his class wince from the noise. Midnight licked her lips at the noise. Such enthusiasm. It almost turns me on. The crowd continued to cheer even as the students fell silent, the same thought crossing their minds as one. Did she really just say that? Several students facepalmed, and the short one from general education simply sighed and dropped to the ground, doing a set of push-ups. Undeterred by the reaction from the participants, Midnight looked around the field and finally spotted her chosen prey. As the highest-scoring applicant on the entrance exam, Izuku Midoriya will lead us today. In the athlete's oath, the teen in question raised one eyebrow and pointed to himself, sighing internally when Midnight nodded once at him. Amar and Uraraka both silently congratulated him, with pats on the back, but not everyone was nearly so positive, eyes narrowing as they spotted the Greenette and realized he was the center of Kiyoma's attention. Him? Really? More like the highest scorer on the hero exam. I dunno if he represents me here. What? That stupid shitty bastard. Why does Deku get to do it? And just like that, my mind is made up, Midoriya thought, ascending the steps to the podium on stage. Looking around the assembled students, the audience in attendance and, in a somewhat more detached way, the audience across the world, the Greenette briefly shuddered. That's a lot of eyes on you, Izuku? You're gonna do great, 9th. Knock their socks off. Banjo encouraged from the back of his mind. I'm already so proud of you, Izuku. Do your best. A warm feeling flooded the teen's veins at his grandmother's support. The other vestiges joined in to offer their own support much the same, and for a brief moment the Greenette almost swore he heard a quiet woo from 3rd, before a burst of irritation from 2nd flooded his mind. By the way, when are you going to tell my brother that you can communicate with us? Midoriya's uncle asked him. The Greenette just smirked. Eventually. But not right now. I'm still mad at him and Tenko for going into politics behind my back, Midoriya thought, turning his attention back to the speech he needed to give. Clearing his throat slightly, he stepped up to the microphone and began to speak. The athlete's oath, he began, a plan slowly forming in his head. Like many of you, I've watched this very competition for years and it's a little surreal for me to be here. But one thing I've noticed is that there is no clear athlete's oath, it changes from year to year. A grin spread across Midoriya's face as he spoke. So, like everyone else who's made this speech recently, I'm going to give my own version of the oath now that UA has so graciously given me this soapbox. Murmurs spread through the crowd, much to the teen's delight, as he continued to speak. Today we've all gathered here to fight as students, I might add, for the entertainment and enthusiasm of a good chunk of the world population. I'm going to overlook any moral and ethical concerns from that, by the way, and just ask that you as audience members reserve any serious judgment on us for today. We're still legally children. Even if some of us are absurdly strong children by the standards of any era but our own. Among our number, across all these first-year classes, there may be students with quirks that some people may see negatively. Mutant quirks. Behind his mask, Mizo Shoji raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Weak quirks. Despite his best efforts, Nito Monoma couldn't help but wince. How can someone be strong if they rely on others for everything? So-called villainous quirks. Revelry in the dark, murmured Fumikage Tokoyami, pondering his own hands for a moment. And even those without any quirk at all. A wave of uncertainty spread through the crowd of general education and business course students. For at least a few among their number without heroic ambitions, that part hit too close to home. So today, as athletes, we swear to give our all out there on the field, for the sake of our pride as competitors and our ambitions for the future. The Greenette concluded his speech, now barely restraining a mad grin. And all of you out there in the audience, I want you to think and reflect upon what I've said, and strive to be better versions of yourselves in your daily lives too. Is anyone with me? A long pause rang through the stadium, but that was quickly cut away by a single person in the crowd beginning to clap. The applause spread like wildfire, and soon the entire venue was on their feet clapping and cheering on Midoriya's message. The teenager grinned as he leaned back to the microphone. Good. Then let's go beyond. Plus ultra, the audience roared back as he stepped away, bowing dramatically to Uraraka and Aomar as he returned to the stadium floor. What an exhilarating speech. Midnight cheered approvingly. Let's find out what our first event is this year, why don't we? As she spoke, a Titantron behind her displayed a graphic of a wheel with names such as King of the Hill and Labyrinth, which ultimately came to a stop on an obstacle race around the outside of the stadium. The rated R heroine elaborated further as the students looked at her quizzically. The race will run 4 kilometers from the west gate back around to the east gate. Attacking other entrants is strictly prohibited and will result in disqualification, but otherwise anything goes. The west gate will open in 1 minute, so be there or be square. This is it, Midoriya thought, doing some quick stretches to warm up as he glanced around the crowd. I've already had my big soapbox moment, now it's time for me to prove that I can back up my words with my actions. The Greenette's eyes narrowed as he spotted Bakugou. And if I can knock him down a peg along the way, even better. Begin, shouted Kiyoma, cracking the long leather whip she wore by her side to signify the start of the race. Immediately, a wave of students flooded the corridor exiting the stadium to the west. Distantly, Midoriya heard MIC and Aizawa comment on how the corridor was a natural pinch point and a potential hazard for the competitors. I figured that would be the case, he said, feeling a chill in the air and leaping into the air just in time to avoid a sheet of ice from Todoroki, danger sense giving him just a moment's notice before the hazard struck. Stepping back from the crowd, the Greenette smirked wickedly as his eyes traced an unorthodox path out of the stadium. I know what I'm going to do. Then he started running, that is, running away from the corridor. Has one a S Midoriya gone mad? MIC shouted. He's going the opposite direction from the race. Sure enough, Midoriya had decided that taking an alternate route was the best course of action. The green-haired teen had dashed clear across the stadium, right past midnight, and, in a burst of green electricity, leapt up the wall around the edge of the field, taking just a moment to survey the crowd around him before running straight up one of the concrete braces that connected from the edge of the field up to the bottom of the stadium's roof. As he ran, the power of One for All crackled around him more and more intensely, a veritable storm of green energy surrounding him by the time he reached the top. Then, in a move that shocked everyone watching, Izuku Midoriya turned around, winked at the camera, and jumped. A gust of wind buffeted the stadium's audience as a momentary burst of 45% of One for All shot the teenager like a cannonball high over the field, narrowly clearing the top of the stadium's shade structure and sending him into the open air above the obstacle course. Oh my God! Present MIC shouted, genuine shock in his voice. Izuku Midoriya has cleared the entire stadium in one jump and is now rocketing towards the first obstacle, the Robo Inferno. I knew that one was going to be a problem child. Aizawa sighed, a hint of pride in his voice. I'll be interested to see how he handles this obstacle. Not bad, Greenie remarked Kyoka Gyro, her eyes tracking the greenette as he soared high overhead. A robot attempted to ambush her from behind, but was quickly dispatched with a jab from one of her earlobe jacks. Deku, you lying bastard! Bakugou roared incoherently, to the confusion of the competitors around him. How dare you upstage me? Good job, Midoriya-kun, Uraraka said, swinging a 3-point bot into a squad of 1-pointers. I never thought I'd get to use this one because of how incredibly situational it is, but I'm certainly not going to miss the occasion, Midoriya thought, noticing that Todoroki had frozen one of the gargantuan 0-pointers in a precarious position. His eyes widened when he saw some students running into its potential drop zone. Here goes nothing. 1 for all. Shock absorption. Hyper regeneration. 45%. As he fell towards the 0-pointer, the teen began to spin, his body becoming the center of a small but strong and concentrated vortex of air pressure and force. A grin split the teen's face. Knowing that he was about to emulate one of his idol's most iconic yet rarely used super moves. California, smash. An explosion of pure force shook the UA High campus as the vortex made contact with the 0-pointer's face, crumpling the gigantic military-grade robot like an aluminum can. Todoroki himself barely had time to react before the head of the machine was sheared off from the force and sent flying into one of the pitfalls at the obstacle ahead, the fall. As other students ran along, gawking in awe, Midoriya landed next to Todoroki himself, an expression of anger on his face. What were you thinking? The greenette yelled, electricity crackling as he ran past the ice. User. You could have crushed someone back there if not for me. Todoroki regarded him coldly. That's their business, not mine. They can dodge, can't they? A furious grimace crossed Midoriya's face. You would have been disqualified, so it is absolutely your business, he roared. I'm done talking to you though, I'll have to meet you in the tournament to get that lesson into your head. With that, Midoriya ran forward towards the fall, clearing the pitfalls between pillars with quick and precise jumps boosted by 1 for all. And after what appeared to be a furious shouting match with Shoto Todoroki, Izuku Midoriya has reached the second obstacle, the fall. There's nets at the bottom, don't worry, but if you slip, you're out. In the seat next to him, Aizawa grimaced. If whatever Todoroki said pissed Midoriya off that badly, I have even more reason to be concerned about that kid, the Erasure hero thought, writing a note on a sticky note in front of him. Meanwhile, Midoriya had just cleared the second obstacle when Danger Sense screamed at him. Look out! A click under his right foot alerted him to trouble, and the greenette had Just enough time to draw in 20% of one for all before a bright pink explosion shrouded him from view. It looks like Midoriya has just encountered the third obstacle. Minefield mayhem. The mines bear little risk of personal injury to students, as they are little more than flashbangs with baby powder and pink dye. They'd still be wise to avoid this obstacle. However, as Midoriya blinked the spots out of his eyes and shook the ringing from his ears, a cold sensation on his left alerted him to company. Damn it, I lost too much time because of that. Mine. Now Todoroki is getting ahead of me again. Out of my way, you damned nerd, shouted an all-too-familiar voice on the greenette's other side as Bakugou dashed by with his Blast Rush Turbo, only narrowly avoiding catching Midoriya in his Quirk's explosions and kicking up a cloud of pink around him. Get back. Here, Prince Zuko. Enough of this. I can stand losing to Todoroki, but coming in behind Bakugou is unacceptable, the villain heir snarled to himself. Drawing in a solid 10% of 1-4. All, Midoriya dashed forward, relying on speed alone to clear the mines without regard for whether or not he stepped on them. The feeling of 1-for-all spread through his body like a fire, begging on him to draw in more of it, and Midoriya obliged, opening the valve a little further to let out something more along the lines of 17%, carrying him past an indignant Bakugou and allowing him to rapidly close in on Todoroki, when "Cool your jets, ninth," the voice of the fourth holder, Hikage Shinomori, rang through Midoriya's head. Remember the research you did, don't get hasty and trap yourself. Time seemed to slow for the teen as he thought back to a week earlier, when he was devising strategies for the sports festival. 1 week ago. Alright, I think I've found some patterns, Midoriya said, pausing a recording of the sports festival from 5 years prior and turning to Himiko, pencil and notebook still in hand. Every year, the first event is a weeder event, something big, like an obstacle course, designed to rapidly remove a large number of participants. Seems simple enough. What about the second round? His companion asked, staring back at him from her seat on the nearby couch, an almost empty blood bag in hand. That's where things get tricky. See, there's a stipulation that comes into play every few years, seemingly at random, that I have to account for, the junior crime lord explained, rising to a nearby whiteboard he had mounted on the wall of their hideout's upstairs living room to gather his thoughts at times like this. The second round event is always a teamwork event designed to siphon out most of the top 50 or so contestants that passed the first event down to 16 for an easy single elimination tournament bracket. But the stipulation in question makes it more complicated by incentivizing people to target whoever the top scorer in the first round was, usually by giving them and their team a point value in the team event far higher than every other team on the field, he said, writing out a few examples of such team events: capture the flag, cavalry, battle, dodgeball and king of the hill. This stipulation only pops up a few times a decade. But I've decided there's a high enough risk of it happening that I should aim for second, not first this year. Makes sense. That easy, you're high enough to get first dibs on almost any other competitors for your team, but not number one, so people won't go after you unless they're smart enough to not fall for Nezu's psychology trick there, Himiko said. Are you sure you can hold yourself back enough to not accidentally take first, or that you can throw the race while making it look convincing? Back in the present. That's right. Thank you for the reminder, Shinomori-san. Midoriya thought, slowly, tamping down the output of 1-for-all back to around 10% as he approached the gate. Ahead of him, Todoroki stared back with a hint of confusion as he realized the competitor who had been rapidly gaining on him was suddenly falling behind again. Now, to throw a little bit of smokescreen out as well, just to make it look convincing. And like that, we have a winner, MIC shouted. In first place, none other than Shoto Todoroki of Class 1A. The crowd roared in approval as the current number 2 hero's heir made it back to the Colosseum, taking in the crowd, despite the confusion flickering across his features. In hot pursuit, but Seemingly losing steam, 1S Izuku Midoriya comes in second. The greenette exhaled as he came to a stop, the slight wisps of smoke coming from his body, slowly petering out. Somewhere behind him, he could feel his former best friend staring a hole in the back of his head as present MIC continued to rattle off the remaining students as they qualified for the next round. And that's all for the obstacle course, folks, MIC announced over the loudspeakers, as the final stragglers made it back into the arena. The top 40 contestants will be moving on to the team competition round, while everyone else is eliminated from contention. Looking around at the other qualifying contestants, Midoriya took a mental inventory of his competitors. Aside from the pink-haired support corps student and the really short general education student, all the others were hero corps students. With that in mind, 2 hero students were absent from the group. Earlier he'd seen 1BS Kojiro Bondo eliminated by the pitfall trap, and Hagakure was also conspicuously absent, which Midoriya chalked up to her using the whole thing as a diversion for some peerless legacy business. Midnight stepped back up to the podium, using one of her numerous toys to bring all attention back to her. Attention everyone. With the race now at a close, the remaining 40 students gathered here will be moving on to the next round, the Rated R hero said, before gesturing to the Titantrons, almost certainly rigged, lottery system as it slowly came to a stop. The next round will be a cavalry battle. As the audience murmured, the pro seized the chance to continue largely uninterrupted. Allow me to explain, Midnight said, pointing to the screen. The participants will form teams of 2 to 4 and start wherever they want in the arena. In theory, it's the same as the playground game, but there's a few added twists, she added, licking her lips. Each player is assigned a point value based on their placement in the race. 40th place is worth 5 points. 39th is worth 10 and so on. All's going as expected. When does the other shoe drop? Midoriya wondered. Except for first place, which will be worth 200 million points. And there it is. Looks like my gamble paid off, the greenette teen decided, as all eyes turned to Shoto Todoroki. While Midnight explained further on how this stipulation was designed to spice the competition up further, Midoriya stared warily in the direction of Endeavor's heir, who returned the vicious stares directed his way with a frosty glare so cold that it seemed to burn, almost as if merely looking back at the competitors was his way of issuing a challenge. Just bring it. Chapter end notes. Author's notes. Well, it's been a minute. Actually, that's one hell of an understatement. It'll have been a full year next weekend where I'm at. I want to start off by saying I'm sorry to everyone for blueballing y'all for 51 weeks. Time to explain, and I'll be succinct about it. 2023 was not my year. It started with abject insanity in my family life, then I moved on from my job of almost 3 years to a new job in a different field and all the chaos that comes with it. Then my grandmother passed away. Hold off on the condolences, she had pretty bad cancer, and by the time it was all over it was a mercy, and then the holidays rolled around and the year was over before I could even process what the hell had happened. Anyways, I'm unemployed right now, and since the job search is incredibly dependent on actually hearing back from people who might otherwise hire me, I got the idea that maybe I could shake off a little bit of my existential malaise by writing again. So let's jump right into the chapter that spent over a year hanging out on the tabs of my browser window. All Might has officially announced his retirement, a decision that many people are shocked by and that some find to be a pleasant surprise. For our hero, however, it's an unexpected wrench in his plans, and that's only going to be the start of him doubling down on obsessively examining and re-examining his plans for unexpected results, regardless of how good an idea it is to be that paranoid. We've also passed the first stage of the sports festival, and in this case Midoriya's paranoia was proven somewhat right, as he managed to avoid the 10 million point stipulation that would have awaited if he'd gotten first place. For reference, The ranking is below, as follows. First, Shoto Todoroki, 200 million. Second, Izuku Midoriya, 195. Third, Katsuki Bakugou, 190. Fourth, Ibara Shiozaki, 185. Fifth, Tenya Ida, 180. Sixth, Denki Kaminari, 175. Seventh, Juzo Honinuki, 170. Eighth, Fumikage Tokoyami, 165. Ninth, Okako Uraraka, 160. 10th, Minoru Mineta, 155. 11th, Ahiro Kirishima, 150. 12th, Tetsu, 145. 13th, Setsuna Tokage, 140. 14th, Itsuka Kendo, 135. 15th, Momo Yoroirozu, 130. 16th, Tsuyu Asui, 125. 17th, Hitoshi Shinsu, 120. 18th, Shihai Kuroiro, 115. 19th, Jirota Shishida, 110. 20th, Nito Minoma, 105. 21st, Mizo Shoji, 100. 22nd, Pony Tsunotori, 95. 23rd, Mina Ashido, 90. 24th, Hiryu Rin, 85. 25th, Mashirao Ojiro, 80. 26th, Senkai Bara, 75. 27th, Kyoka Jiro, 70. 28th, Yosetsu Awase, 65. 29th, Togaru Kamakiri, 60. 30th, Rikido Soto, 55. 31st, Hanta Siro, 50. 32nd, Yui Kodai, 45. 33rd, Kosi Tsubaraba, 40. 34th, Narenjiki Shoda, 35. 35th, Leiko Yanaji, 30. 36th, Koji Koda, 25. 37th, Manga Fukadashi, 20. 38th, Kinoko Komori, 15. 39th, Mai Hatsume, 10. 40th, Yuga Aiyama, 5. Next chapter, we'll be going right into the cavalry battle, team building interactions and maybe even some of Todoroki's daddy issues. Stay tuned, hopefully it won't be another year of waiting, because at this pace I'll have it finished by the time I'm 80, and nobody wants it to take that long. Peace. DVD 181. Please drop by the archive and comment to let the creator know if you enjoyed their work.